of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for our invocation by Councilmember Mike Boyette.
We have drunk from wells we did not dig. We have been shaded under trees we did not plant. We have traveled on roads we did not build. Help us to remember, O Lord, those who have gone before us and the work they did to build this city. Now let us also be mindful of those who will come after us, so we may be able to hand them the good fruits of our own labor. As we do our work, instill in us the qualities of leadership, not only wisdom and courage, but also humility, empathy, kindness, and respect. Above all, we know that leaders are called to set a good example. We pray for strength to set standards of that example for all who observe us. Amen.
Thank you. Tony, would you please call the roll?
Oh, sorry about that. Shaw,
Here.
Yakowicz,
Present.
Neese,
Here.
Ewalt,
Here.
Joy,
Present.
Chiriki,
Present.
Harrington,
Present.
Ronning,
Here.
Boyette,
Here.
Brown,
Here.
Mayor Cole.
Here. We have tonight minutes from May 11th meeting. Is there a comment or a motion pertaining to the May 11th, 2020 minutes? Councilmember Yakowicz.
Thank you, Honor Council. I make a motion to approve.
Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Joy. Is there any
Mayor.
discussion?
Mayor Cole,
Yes.
those minutes are pending.
Oh, I'm sorry. Appreciate you pointing that out. I assume those motions are withdrawn. Okay, we'll move on then to council courtesies, or not to council courtesies. We just have a courtesy. Is Chief St. John on? Will he be leading us through that?
Mayor, I am here, and I can go on video too to show you that I am, but there I am.
Okay, as long as you're dressed.
Thank you, thank you. I will get off of here so you don't have to watch me read. This is certainly loses some of its luster of doing it virtually. I'd prefer to do it in person in chambers, but nonetheless, I'm not sure if Mike Nelson is on as a participant, but it's my pleasure to bring to your attention an incident that without the public's help would have certainly resulted in a tragedy. On April 11th of this year, the police department received a report of a missing and endangered juvenile female. She was determined to be at extreme risk and had been missing for over 12 hours. The police department mobilized its detective division, and public announcements were made in an attempt to locate the victim. Downtown Business Association officer Brad Mansour contacted Mike Nelson of the Northern Hotel and asked if Mike could use his network to contact all the other hotels and motels to see if they had any information on the missing juvenile. Mike did not hesitate and sent out the message. Within minutes, Mike called Officer Mansour back and said that his staff was reporting suspicious activity from early in the morning on April 10. You see, Mike has long recognized the danger and damage of human trafficking and has taken a proactive stance and a leadership role. Mike realizes the nexus that hotels and motels have to trafficking and does everything he can to educate and collaborate with law enforcement and his peers. Leading by example, Mike has a long-standing policy that requires his staff to obtain ID from anyone paying cash for a room. And that happened. And his well-trained supervisor did just that and reported an adult male accompanied by a juvenile female paying cash for a room. The supervisor ID'd the male and the Northern's surveillance camera captured the images. That information was immediately relayed to Mike, and without hesitation, he contacted Officer Mansour and headed down to the Northern to recover the video. Fortunately, the victim was located thereafter alive and well. Subsequent investigation resulted in the arrest of an individual for multiple felony charges. This was made possible not only from statements by the victim, but from evidence provided by Mike and the Northern staff. Mayor and Council, this is the embodiment of see something, say something, and in this case made all the difference in getting the victim located and returned to her parents. For his leadership in this area, Mike is awarded the Billings Police Department Citizens Award for actions that provided a valuable service to the police department and a fellow citizen. And let me go back here. So whenever I find Mike, I will present this to him and thank him for certainly making a difference in this particular case. And I don't know if he's on. Other than that, Mayor, thank you for your time.
He's
Thank
on the
you.
phone right now.
Okay, thank you. I didn't see him on, but Tony, you said that Mike just joined us. Is that right?
Yes. Hi, Mike. Thank you for calling.
Mike,
Hey,
I don't,
thank you very much.
I don't know if you can hear us, but at this point, it was where we would stand up and give you our applause. So we're going to do that in the best we can in this virtual setting, probably with everybody on mute. But if you're watching us, we are giving you and your staff and the Billings Police Department, who also initiated this, our greatest applause. Did you hear that across town, Mike?
It's an honor, and I'm really excited to be here, even if I am technically inefficient and dialed in late. I apologize for that. First off, let me tell you that it's a really great police department. I count a lot of the officers friends, and I'm excited to be a help in any way that we can.
Well, again, on behalf of the Billings Police Department, on behalf of the City Council, and most importantly, on behalf of your entire community, you have our deepest appreciation and admiration for everything that you did in this series of events, but we know it's just indicative of what you've probably done in the past and will do in the future. So thank you again very, very much. And I hope you'll communicate that to your staff. And if we can do anything more substantive for you and your staff, please don't hesitate to ask, okay?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. And Chief St. John owes you that plaque. So don't let him get off by not giving it to you, okay?
I'm on my way over tomorrow, Rich.
All right. Thanks again.
Much
Appreciate it.
Thank
What makes our community strong. Thank you, Chief St. John, for bringing us that great story, and glad it ended well.
Thank
Tonight,
you, Your Honor.
thank you. We do have a proclamation tonight relating to Men's Health Month, and the proclamation reads as follows. Whereas, despite advances in medical technology and research, men continue to live an average of 5 years less than women, with Native American and African American men having the lowest life expectancy. And whereas men who are educated about the value of preventative health can play in prolonging their lifespan and their role as productive family members, will be more likely to participate in health screenings. And whereas fathers who maintain a healthy lifestyle are role models for their children and have happier, healthier children. And whereas the Men's Health Month website has been established at www.menshealthmonth.org and features resources and information about awareness events and activities, including Wear Blue for Men's Health. And whereas Billings Men's Health Month will focus on a broad range of men's health issues, including heart disease, mental health, diabetes, and prostate, testicular, and colon cancer. And whereas the citizens of Billings are encouraged to increase their awareness of the importance of a healthy lifestyle, regular exercise, and medical checkups, now therefore I, William Cole, Mayor of the City of Billings, do hereby proclaim June 2020 as Men's Health Month. in Billings and encourage all of our citizens to pursue preventative health practices and early detection efforts. Thank you for everyone involved with Men's Health Month. Council reports. Do we have any council reports from council members relating to any boards or other organizations that they serve on? Seeing none. Move on to our city administrator reports. Chris Kukulski, do you have any reports for us?
Mayor and council, I'll be brief. I know we've got a very full agenda tonight. You do have maybe technically 3 ex parte communications. I think you're all aware of some emails that came in late this afternoon. One was requested to be read, and that will happen here shortly. The second item I wanted to flag is just for you to give feedback, not now, but maybe via email or tomorrow evening, and that is what to do about city council meetings when we get to phase 2. So in the weekly, I asked for some feedback. We get to phase 2, June 1, and whether you want to meet live, and if so, we've got some logistics issues to work through because of the council chambers. So if you look at the weekly, give me feedback there. We'll go from there. I'll leave it at that, Mayor, with as full as our agenda is tonight.
Thank you very much. I believe that Tony had a communication. Tony, why don't you read that as part of the public comment when we get to that, the constituent that asked that his email be read?
Okay, sounds great.
And I guess if there aren't any other administrator reports, I'll just comment that we do not have a COVID-19 report tonight, but we will tomorrow night by County Health Officer John Felton and the Economic Response Group head Steve Arviskow. And that will again be tomorrow night when we meet for our work session. With that, then I guess we'll move on to public comment on non-public agenda items. Tonight, because there aren't public hearings on any of the agenda items, this is the opportunity for the public to be heard on anything that's on our agenda. They'll need to call in to the phone number, which is a local Montana number. So area code 406-237-6196. That number again, 237-6196 on any item on the agenda tonight. While we wait for those calls, if there are any, we'll ask Tony Keener, our clerk, to read a letter that was sent to us. And before we do that, Councilmember Yakovich.
Thank you, Honor Council. Because Mr. Kukulski brought up that point, and we have discussion tonight, I'd just like to throw my 2 cents regarding when we meet. If we have to meet hodgepodge at City Council, I don't mind meeting like this for another month. I'm comfortable. I'm just throwing that out rather than trying to sit in the gallery and all over the place in June. So if we can move into phase 3 by July, that's cool. But I'm happy with this right now. Thank you, Honor.
Okay, thank you. Chris was soliciting your input, so thank you for giving that. But I don't think there was a desire to try to make that decision tonight, but feel free to offer your further input to Chris. I don't think Chris was suggesting that we have to pull the trigger on exactly June 1st, or it's got to be all or nothing. There's maybe some hybrid model that we can work out, but he did want to flag the issue, which I appreciate because it'll be very important and better to think about it now than rush into something. Tony, could you read that item and then also let us know if we've got any phone calls?
Okay, Mr. Clark Johnson at 6180 Masters Boulevard sent in an email and asked it to be read. It states, I am Clark Johnson, Billings resident and Parks Board member. I do understand the issues regarding the necessity of making changes to the mill levy and the need to create a separate millage for the Parks and Recreation Department. But please consider my suggestions as you make any changes. Number 1, PD1 be kept open and set initially to only the dollar amount needed for the initial $250,000 matching amount for Colson Park. I am very concerned that the economic damage of COVID-19 may prevent public donations to reach that amount. As we all know, the first $250,000 of donation is needed to obtain the Exxon Oil Spill Fund matching amount of $250,000. This $500,000 total is frankly not enough to make much headway into needed improvements to Colson Park, but it opens the door, makes minor enhancements, and allows all of us to plan a Colson Park strategy for the future. I am concerned for Colson Park due to current conditions, but let's don't give up on it now. Number 2, Parks would accept the initial 31 mil points and ask that it be increased annually by the cost of living index. That might be considered to be a double benefit since assessed values may also increase. But even if so, it could give Parks a dollar amount possibility for bond issues for capital dollar requirements for Parks, possibly the upcoming Castle Rock master plan. Thank you, Clark Johnson.
Thank you very much, Tony. Do we have any phone calls to that number 237-6196?
We do. I'll take it now. Hello, and thank you for your call. You have reached the public comment period for tonight's City Council meeting. You will have 3 minutes in which to give your comment. May I have your name and address, please?
Pam Ellis, 2000 Outlook Drive, Billings.
Go ahead, Pam.
I have comments that are related to Park. I did send the email today noting that the April 27th payments include money to the design firm in Bozeman for Colson Park coming out of PD1 funds. There are no PD1 funds allocated to Colson Park in the fiscal year 2020 budget. There's money in the fiscal year 2021 CIP plan, but that's for toilets. I understand that it's an issue that you can't hardly plan for 5 years ahead or 1 year ahead or 6 months ahead to the exact dollar. But part of the problem with parks is that nobody trusts their budgeting. That was stated directly by Tom Refsis at the last special park board meeting. So I think it's inappropriate that kind of expenditure be on a consent agenda, because you need to know if you're going to approve that, what of the approved CIP funds is going to be cut. On a related thing, Clark obviously just brought up his support for the $250,000 for the matching fund for Colson. Now I know that's been offered as part of a settlement for the franchise fee, but currently that's not in the budget. So again, it's an issue that you have a CIP, you have an approved budget, and you do something else. So I do support both putting the public safety mill levy and the park funding on the ballot. I personally think this is a good year. I couldn't tell you whether it's going to pass. It's true that people are hurting, but every economic indicator is that at a minimum, it will take 2 years to come close to normal in Montana. I've heard people say as much as a decade, but definitely the year after will be even worse, both at the state level and at the local level. So if you have a chance of increasing funding on the mills, those are both two very creative, very sensible, very supportable benefits. And most people, if 11% are unemployed, 89% are still employed. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank you very much. After we're done with public comment, Chris Kelsey, if you want to comment on any of the public comments, we'll give you that opportunity, but don't. That'll be up to you. Tony, any other public comment?
You will have 3 minutes in which to give your comment. May I have your name and address, please?
My name is Corey Brinkman, and my address is 951 Arrington, Billings, Montana, 59105.
Go ahead, Corey. Corey, go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. It cut out for a second. So I was calling in regards to the sidewalk project for our neighborhood. The way that the boulevards would look, I think, would be kind of non-beneficial for the idea that anytime that it would rain or anything, pretty much anything that you would put in it would get washed down the street because we get really bad flooding on the road. And I guess the other thing about it is I know they were trying to reach regulation and everything for having it to where it's wide enough and everything and a safe passage. But one of the big things that okay.
Corey, are you still there?
Okay. Yeah.
Do you have your phone on or your television on?
Yeah.
Can you,
I've got it on the computer right now, the live stream.
okay, can you please mute your
Yeah.
computer?
Definitely. Yep. Yeah,
Okay,
sorry about that.
you can continue.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, just also they were saying that the regulations and everything that it might need for how wide it is would need to have the boulevard there, but looking into it, that was more of a plan and regulation needed for if it was going to be like a through street or anything, but it's not, it's just a regular neighborhood. And so, I mean, I don't think that would necessarily be any central thing. And I guess just the other thing would be the idea that if we did the boulevard plus the sidewalk, then with the vehicles that I have at the property in the driveway, that would make it to where if I have anything more than one vehicle in the driveway, it would end up obstructing the sidewalk. And then I would kind of get in trouble for that, I guess. And I have my work van is a Ford Transit, which I can't park on the side street. So therefore that would kind of complicate things. And I would end up having to drive to work to get the van every morning.
Okay, thank you for your call, Corey.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello, and thank you for your call. You have reached the public comment period for tonight's city council meeting. You will have 3 minutes in which to give your comment. If you have your television on, please mute it now. May I have your name and address, please?
My name is Jeannie Pearson. My address is 1033 Aronson Avenue.
Okay, go ahead, Jeannie.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to thank Pam Purington, Frank Ewalt, Roy Meese, and Mike Yakowicz, who personally came to visit with the residents and the property owners here on Aronson about our concerns of putting in a 7-foot sidewalk or a 5-foot boulevard, 5-foot sidewalk. ADA's, which has the highest standard of safety, only requires a 3-foot unobstructed sidewalk in and to be compliant with the ADA law. We have also had KPS, who is a registered arborist, and he came by and said that either way the sidewalk goes in, we would be losing our 2 front yard trees with a value of $4,000 in addition to having to plant more trees and maintain a boulevard, which the city is requesting us. Also, the 5-foot from the curb sidewalk makes sense because the utilities are already set up for 5-foot curb walk. The 5-foot curb walk also does not require a city engineer to be on site, thus saving the taxpayers money, not only the property owners, but the other taxpayers who are paying the wages of that city engineer who would just be sitting and doing nothing. $14,000 is not a cost-effective price for a sidewalk. 25 miles an hour is what the speed limit is on Nutter and Aronson. There are no parks on this end of Aronson. There is no school on this end of Aronson. 98% of the 32 affected homeowners, property owners on Aronson are in favor of a 5-foot sidewalk from the curb. One size, one rule, one recommendation does not fit in all situations. Again, I want to stress that ADA only requires a 3-foot unobstructed sidewalk. And they are the highest standard of safety. Thank you again.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Bye.
Hello, and thank you for your call. You have reached the public comment period for tonight's City Council meeting. You will have 3 minutes in which to give your comment. May I have your name and address, please?
My name is Scott Wetzel. My address is 439 Grandview Boulevard and in Billings.
Okay, go ahead, Scott.
All right, I am calling in relation to the proposed bond sale for the tax increment bonds, and specifically in relation to the conversion of North 30th Street to a two-way street. And I would just like to express my reservations about that conversion. I feel like we haven't really had an opportunity to really talk about all the potential issues that might cause. Certainly it might do some good things, but I just would encourage the council to engage the public in this. I don't think I've missed that engagement, but I would like to be a part of it. That is all I have to say.
Thank you for your call, Scott.
Thank you.
Hello, and thank you for your call. You have reached the public comment period for tonight's City Council meeting. You will have 3 minutes in which to give your comment. If you have your television on, please mute it now. May I have your name and address, please?
Yes, my name is James Sawani, and I live at 202 Ashley Court North here.
Can you spell your last name, please?
Zoanni.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I just bought this house. My wife and I bought this house, and it's a corner lot of Aronson about a month ago, I suppose. And we had heard there were some things that could be going on with a boardwalk or a sidewalk, or we would have to give up some property. Never dreamed, though, that it would come to this. I guess I would have looked twice at buying the house if this proposed sidewalk, what the 7 feet width sidewalk. I don't know what you guys are calling it exactly, but I have a 40-foot row of caraganas. I have a garden. I have a fence, and I have about a 50-foot tree that has been there for 35 years, and a shed that will be affected by this. And like I said, if I would have known something like this was going to happen a month after I bought this house, I don't know, but it's pretty upsetting. So I don't know if can you tell me where you stand on this? Can you tell me what's going to happen with this procedure?
The item that you are calling in reference to is item 3. Item 4 on our agenda tonight, and that is when council will be discussing it.
Okay, when is the decision going to be made on this?
They will be discussing it and making a decision tonight during the council meeting.
Okay. So is the council there listening to this right now? Is that how this works? I've never done this before.
They are. They have heard everything you
Yeah.
said during your public comment.
Yeah, and it is upsetting because I don't know, I don't know about everybody else, but again, it's about a 40-foot row of Caraganas. I don't know what's going to happen to those. A fence. Oh, I forgot, and the garden too will be affected. That's a lot of that. That's a lot of stuff, and it's just gonna. It really is going to make a difference on the landscape of this house that we just purchased a month ago. So.
Okay, you have reached your 3 minutes. So
I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for your call. Hello, and thank you for your call. You have reached the public comment period for tonight's city council meeting. You will have 3 minutes in which to give your comment. May I have your name and address, please?
Debbie Bertusk, 1032 Aronson Avenue.
Go ahead, Debbie.
My name is Debbie Bertusk, 1032 Aronson for over 41 years. Good evening, City Council and Mayor. Thank you for listening to our concern about sidewalks on Aronson Avenue. And thank you everyone that came out to look at Aronson. This is an old 50-year-old subdivision and has established trees that will die from coming too close with sidewalks. This street leads to no parks or schools and has a steep incline that many do not want to walk. So sidewalks will be used not as much as the other ones. We still would like the 5 foot from the curb. The extra money that would have to be paid by the city to move things and the extra projects, they could use this money on extra street projects in the city. The cost of a 5 foot sidewalk from the curb does not require an engineer, but anything additional to 5 feet has administration costs with engineers included, which is over $1,000 for each home. The ADA requires only 3 foot sidewalks. The speed on Aronson and Nutter are 25 miles per hour, and the accident that was on the west end several weeks ago would not have saved anyone walking on the sidewalk, as the car went all the way to the house. And there was another one today at the lower end of Broadwater with the same effect. I would think that the city employees should show some integrity and try to cut expenses for the city. This should be a priority for each of them. We already have 5 foot from the curb sidewalks on our street. And they're looking at the stats that they gave. They're going to put in about 15 from the curb. We already have 10, and they're going to do 17 Boulevard. So that means that they'll be over 5 feet, more 5 feet from the curb than the Boulevard. We would consider, and please thank you for considering this in your decisions. And we would like the city to do their job. Thank you.
Thank you for your call, Debbie. Hello, and thank you for your call. You have reached the public comment period for tonight's City Council meeting. You will have 3 minutes in which to give your comment. May I have your name and address, please?
Name is Leo Wohler, W-O-H-L-E-R, 933 Aronson Avenue.
Go ahead, Leo.
Yes, I'm just calling to in support of the 5 foot curb sidewalk. The rationale is because we have lived here for 47 plus years. When we built here, our property happened to be approximately 2 feet above Aronson Road. So we decided to put in a retaining wall built at the specifications that the city code and ordinance out here claimed at 5 feet from the curbing. So we have built a retaining wall and a brick walkway with brick steps to a 5 foot sidewalk. If we go any further than that, it will cause considerable amount of work into landscaping and redoing a existing brick walkway. So we support and accept having a 5-foot sidewalk. That's what we planned for. That's what the city council at that time, 47 years ago, told us we must do. So thank you for your support on that. And yes, we look forward to having a 5-foot curb walkway. Thank you.
Thank you for your call. Hello, and thank you for your call. You have reached the public comment period for tonight's city council meeting. You will have 3 minutes in which to give your comment. If you have your television on, please mute it now. May I have your name and address, please?
My name is Chris Allemond, and I reside at 1001 Aronson Avenue.
Go ahead, Chris.
Okay. I would like to address some of the safety issues that the city has failed us on Aronson Avenue. This is in regard to the sidewalk. One of the key factors, safety issues that the city has caused, maybe not this administration, but previous, because I don't know how long each council member has been on the council itself. But one of the key factors that has really hurt our street the most is the traffic light that was put on Governors and Aronson Avenue. In 2008, this was put in on Aronson and Governors, tying Aronson Avenue on the upper end to our section of street, which is residential. It was residential before the light was put in. It remains residential. It is not an arterial street. The arterial street that it was supposed to be tied into is on Babcock Avenue. It doesn't take a whole lot to figure out the reasoning for that because of the width of Babcock Avenue, and the way it was set up originally was evidently abandoned because the city allowed a house or two to be put there where Aronson would actually Y off before the church and go back to Babcock, which is where the light belongs. If the light was there, we wouldn't get the heavy truck traffic that we do now. We're now experiencing snow removal trucks going up and down this portion of the street, which don't even remove the snow from this portion of the street. But because of the light placement, has caused an extreme amount of traffic. The sidewalk issue is not the repair for this. The moving of the light would be. What one of the council members said about a week ago was, you don't build on a poor foundation. He couldn't have said it any better. And this is exactly what we have with this issue. The city is trying to build on a poor foundation. They've opened this portion of Aronson Avenue up that has caused 2 or 3 safety issues. And we're now trying to repair it by putting boulevard sidewalks in. That is not the repair. We petitioned for speed bumps. The speed bumps, all 3 that are on this portion of the street, are all different sizes. They weren't put in properly. Quite frankly, they're a joke. And they're not, if they were there and put in proper proportion to each other, it would slow traffic down. Please take this into consideration with your vote tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for your call. We do not have any more calls.
Okay, thank you very much. If there's no other public comment, we will close public comment on all agenda items. I assume, Chris Kulski, there's nothing that requires comment. If it's an item on the agenda, you or your staff can comment at that point. Is that correct?
That would be fine. I do want to correct some information that you got this evening regarding funding for Colson Park. We can do that later.
That item is not on our agenda.
Yep.
That's probably more appropriate for tomorrow night in detail, but if you want to just make one quick comment. While
It
it's
is
fresh.
not being paid for out of PD1. It's being paid for through half the oil money and half fundraising. So maybe the accounting is going through PD1 and it was fully funded through Big Sky Economic Development's efforts, but no, Park District 1 money is covering that Colson Park Master Plan cost. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Councilmember Neese.
Mayor, that item is on the agenda. It's item, it'll be our bills. So I'll bring it up at that time as well.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. With that, then we'll move on to item number 1, our consent agenda. Are there any separations from the consent agenda? Councilmember Neese and then Councilmember Purrington. Councilmember Neese.
I'm sorry, I'm not actually going to separate the bills. I will ask the question when the bills come around. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Councilmember Purrington. Councilmember Purrington, you are muted.
Sorry. So on item C, I don't know if that's a question, but I asked the question regarding that option to negotiate specific changes. And so I am not familiar with this project other than it's a feasibility study, but I don't know where it's going or why, or I know nothing about it. So.
Okay, so I guess you'd have two choices. One, you can separate it for a separate vote, or you can wait until general discussion, ask some questions of staff. At that point, you could, in theory, separate, but there will perhaps be a motion on the floor to approve it. So you might have to ask for an amendment to that motion. So it's your choice, and we can get a staff explanation for you.
Yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and separate it then, because I don't think at this point I could vote for it.
So this is item 1C, consultant services agreement with Sanderson Stewart on Fifth Avenue corridor feasibility study.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Councilmember Brown, I'll just point out that I think I saw on item 1H1 a Morrison Merrily bill. If that's the case, did you want to abstain on that one?
I do, and I also need to abstain from, let me find it here, I'm sorry, H1 as well.
And that's the one I was referring to, H1.
Yes, that's the one that I need to abstain from.
Okay, very good. Any other separations? Councilmember Ewald.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to separate item E as in Edward.
Acknowledging receipt of petition to vacate alley, La Ray subdivision. Okay. Any other separations? Councilmember Yakovich.
Your Honor, make a motion to approve.
Motion is for approval. Do we have a second? Councilmember Neese? Okay. We'll move on to discussion on the motion there. And here I'll just comment, I learned a handy trick the other day, which is if you want to mute yourself, you can just hit your space button, and that will keep you either muted or off mute as long as you hold the button down. As soon as you let it up, it flips back the other way. So you can try that if it's a short comment. Council member, okay, so we have the motion, we have a second discussion on the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Motion is for approval of the non-separated items. Any discussion before we move on to a vote? Not seeing any, we will proceed to vote on the motion for approval of non-separated consent agenda items. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously.
Mayor, I'm sorry, I actually raised my hand for a question.
I'm sorry. Okay, so Council. So did we have the vote or not, Council?
Yeah, because
I apologize if I missed your.
I apologize. Yeah, I apologize. I told you I was gonna ask a question that says separate H2. I was just gonna ask Andy to explain the Park District expenditure that actually says Park District 1 for the design for the Colson Park Master Plan. Explain the accounting, why it's showing Park District 1 on that.
Okay, so I'm gonna do it this way. We had a vote and we've approved it, but we're gonna go back, get that explanation. If that causes anybody to have any concern about their vote, then I'll entertain a motion for reconsideration of the previous vote. So with that, Andy Zeller, can you comment on item 1H2 and the Colson Park accounting for that feasibility work?
Good evening, Mayor and Council, Councilmember Neese. So a couple things. One, this project was included in the FY19 CIP. That's actually where it was included in the FY19 budget. It was identified as being paid for through some grants and donations, which candidly, I just started looking up after the comment. So I've only found one of them. I see it where what happened is the contribution got deposited into the PD1 fund, and that's why the expenses are coming out of that fund. But again, I haven't had a lot of time to research this thoroughly, but I can see where at least one contribution for $45,000 tagged for the Colson Park Master Plan did get deposited into Park District 1, and that's why the contract and payments have been coming out of there.
Okay, so it's more of a where you've been storing the funds and then now you're paying it. All right, thank you.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you very much. Then that concludes our resolution of the non-separated items. We'll move on then to item 1C, the consultant services agreement for Sanderson Stewart. Councilmember Purington was asking for a bit of an explanation on that. So Wyeth Friday, our planning director, has popped on. Unless Chris Kukulski wants to lead this, I'll turn it over to Wyeth. Is that okay, Chris, if we turn it to Wyeth? Okay, Wyeth, it's all yours.
Okay, yes, thank you, Mayor and Council and Councilmember Purington. This is a feasibility study for the Fifth Avenue corridor, which runs basically through downtown from, it starts actually over near the YMCA. You don't see road through those areas, but it passes through by First Interstate Tower, through the Lincoln Center lot, and goes all the way down toward Metro Park, through the East Billings Urban Renewal District area. Good portion of it as you go further east has rail line on it now, some of it used, some of it not. And this is a project and an analysis that's been looked at over the years, and we're bringing it forward to move it along for an analysis to look at whether that corridor could be developed into a corridor to connect basically through downtown from Metro to downtown and right on through here past the library and such for pedestrian and maybe some other sort of motorized, but motorized in the sense of maybe some kind of people mover or something like that, not vehicle traffic, to move through the community. Along this could have, with a pedestrian type facility, you could have businesses along there through the eBird. You could have art installations. It would really create sort of a spine through that area that would attract and have people be able to move back and forth using different parts in different businesses and facilities along the route. So this is a feasibility study. A lot of this has to do with engagement with the property owners and also with the railroad, which we have been and are in touch with them, but that will be part of this initial step to look at, is there the possibility of being able to repurpose this corridor for other uses? And then if that looks like that is doable based on some of that stakeholder input, then we would move into ideas of how that could be redeveloped in the future. So just to give you an example, some of the property owners who've been expressed interest in this already is the Yellowstone Art Museum, as I mentioned, the YMCA library, and then some properties along in the East Billings corridor as well.
Thank you much, Wyeth. Councilmember Purington.
Thanks, Wyatt. So is there some sort of projection in cost other than that's what this feasibility plan would do? What is your time frame for the study then moving forward? How long do you think that's going to take? It's close to $100,000 for a study. So I would think there's got to be a little bit more concrete thinking regarding what is this going to accomplish? And is the TIF district, the eBird, involved in this at all? Is the downtown TIF involved in this at all? So there's so many questions I guess I have for it that I don't get it.
So Councilmember Purinton and Mayor and Council. So sort of going backwards, I guess, the East Billings Urban Renewal District and the Bird are aware, and we've talked to them about this and this effort. So they're aware. They're not contributing funding. The funding is coming from our transportation planning program, our MPO, in coordination with local matching funds. And it was programmed, actually the council approved this in our annual work program last fall for the fiscal year we're in right now, which is we're operating under the federal fiscal year, which runs until this coming October. So we're in that year under that approved program, and this is one of the items that was included in that. So in terms of completion, we're looking at completing it this fall by the end of the summer and fall before that federal fiscal year ends in October. And the idea is to from doing this is to really give us a springboard and direction on what's possible in that corridor, what could be done going forward, funding sources, what are the best uses of that area. So that's what we were expecting to get out of it. There's not a time frame after we complete this. It's to move forward and look at what are our options and what are other ways to actually move forward and do some improvements if that's what it comes out to be. But you're looking at the rest of this going into basically from now until the fall to complete the study through that funding mechanism.
Councilor Purinton.
Follow up, please. So I guess I would just like to hear a little bit more from council members, possibly the ones that were here before, and what their attitude was, moving forward with this project.
Okay, we can do that, but before we do that, let's have a motion on the table, and then we'll open that up for discussion. Is anybody looking to make a motion? I saw Councilmember Ewald's hand up first, so we'll honor that. Councilmember Ewald.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to make a motion that we, unless this is a time-sensitive deal, I would like to make a motion that we postpone this to a future date or a future year and let's just leave the motion as postponing to another year.
Okay, and Councilmember Neese seconded that to table this item and for a year. Discussion on the motion. Councilmember Ewald and Councilmember Neese.
Is this a time-sensitive issue that has to be dealt with right now in this time of frugality and funding that the city is embarking on?
Mayor and Council and Councilmember Ewald, yes, in the sense that it's programmed into our annual work program that was approved last fall by the community here, by the council, the planning board, the Yellowstone County Commissioners, and then that plan went forward and was approved by the Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration, which is how the funding is allocated for projects like this. So we are working under that approval for this fiscal year, like I said, that ends in October. So that's the reason we would want to complete this now, where we've been approved for that funding allocation through our transportation program.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually had more questions. That's why I seconded it, so I can get on the board. Andy, I'm sorry, Wyeth, you mentioned that the funding is coming from federal taxes and then program and then county-wide planning mill levy. Is that where the other 40% is coming from?
Councilmember Neese and Mayor and Council, yeah, the two sources are our federal transportation planning program, where we receive federal transportation dollars to do transportation studies like this would be our feasibility study. And then what we do is we have our countywide planning levy, which is for overall planning purposes and services that everyone across the county contributes toward. And so we use that money in situations like this for match, because we have to provide some local match through that program. So those are the two sources.
And a quick follow-up, Mayor.
Sure.
Andy, did either the downtown TIF or the eBird, were they asked to participate in this?
Councilmember Neese and Mayor and Council, not in a funding sort, not from a funding standpoint, only from specifically the East Billings district in terms of being a stakeholder and participant to help with engagement, to get feedback from property owners and such, but not from a funding, specifically a funding standpoint.
Okay, and Mayor, I guess I'm just speaking opposed to the motion that I seconded because I like this idea of a corridor going down there. It's not using the general funds, which were tight on budget on, and I am disappointed that we didn't go to the TIFs to get some of their buy-in on this financially. I don't know what else you would have used the budget for the countywide mill levy, but I suppose what I would instead entertain the motion to a substitute motion to approve item number 1C.
Thank you very much. So we have a substitute motion. A second I saw by Councilmember Ronning. So now it's a discussion on the substitute motion. Councilmember Yakovich.
Thank you, Honor and Council. I have to ask Mr. Brown to help me out as well as Mr. Friday, but I believe this came before us a couple years ago, and there was a big turnout of urban renewal district members, and I think at that time they didn't support it. Nevertheless, because I assume that they were given the opportunity to donate money or give money or be aware of it, so I'm going to support this motion. But I was curious, Mr. Friday, what happened? It was 2-3 years ago. Same thing.
Councilmember Yakovich, Mayor Council, it was June of 2016 that this was proposed. Went through our process, but then the council did at that time turn down didn't approve the contract. And the main conversation and discussion was from several members of the East Billings Urban Renewal District that were concerned at that time. But yeah, and since then and recently we've had discussions with them, with the board, and gone through kind of rediscussed all this, and there seems to be the concern isn't like it was before. In fact, when we've had more interest, this has come up in several different projects, like I said, including a few property owners along the corridor that have expressed interest in when this feasibility study might get done. And then others in terms of looking at even from Metro Park in terms of this connectivity in the downtown area. So we've had more conversations in the last few years about it as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the substitute motion, Councilmember Joy, and then Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I will be supporting the substitute motion for approval. As part of our eBird tour, and I'm not sure who all was on that tour, there was a discussion and we were able to look at part of the corridor and how that would connect the eBird to downtown and the connectivity that's really necessary. So there were discussions in council at various times about if the Metro has a really great program, a really great concert, would people who are at that event ever end up going downtown or into the eBird for evening meal, drinks, whatever? Would that ever happen? Well, as it is right now, that might not be feasible. But the idea of connecting pieces together that allows people to walk and for activities to kind of flow back and forth. And that's how I see this, and I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Mike, as I recall, the support from the eBird was because the non-support from the eBird is they didn't want to mess around with any of the rail spurs down there. They were afraid, by kind of getting into it with the railroad and everything else, it might jeopardize having those down there. And I think that was the only reason that they were hesitant at that time. But now I think there's a lot of options for that rail system down there. So I think some of that has kind of changed around, but I don't think it was a non-support of the study. I think there were just portions of it that they didn't really want to get too involved in. And Wyeth, I may be way off, but as I recall, that was the rail spur was kind of a topic at that point. That's all I got.
Thank you. Further discussion on the substitute motion, Councilmember Ewalt and Councilmember Purington?
Thank you, Mayor. I believe there are still 3 businesses that are served by that railroad that would stop connection between everything you're talking about in the metro, and that's Pacific Steel, Snitcher Steel, and then that warehouse on the corner of 13th and 6th Avenue. All 3 of those properties, I'm pretty sure, still use that railroad spur. So that would pretty much jeopardize that connection all the way to the metro. Unless you're gonna debunk those businesses and move them out of town.
Well, Mayor and Council and Councilmember Ewalt, there's no interest or intention in having any of this impact a business if they still are using the rail line. That's part of the whole discussion here about the feasibility of it and whether in the long term it is something that could be considered or not. We've had more and more businesses not use the rail, so it is down to just a few. But that's part of what the conversation has to be to see what options there are. There's the main spur, there's the side spur that goes down to Montana Avenue. So we're going to be looking at all that and talking with all those property owners specifically about that type of issue.
Thank you, Councilmember Purington and Chris Kukulski. Councilmember Purington?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Wyeth, getting back to the motion on not approving or getting, let's see, how did it read? Something about being specific, pull something specific out, direct the staff to negotiate specific changes with Sanderson Stewart and return a revised contract for approval. What would that entail? I mean, I wouldn't know what to change or what to even ask for change.
Councilmember Purington and Mayor and Council, I do not know exactly what you're referring to. So I'd have to, we use a standard contract template and then that the city approves. So I would actually have to look. I don't know exactly where you're seeing that. I'd have to just see what that's related to.
It's on our agenda item under alternatives analyzed as to how we can vote on it. Chris, I don't know if you know something about that as well, so.
Mayor and Council,
yeah.
I think it's just referring generic, and you'll see this occasionally under the alternatives. If council members have specific changes that they want to see, they can certainly bring those up.
Yeah.
That I think is the answer to your question there.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the item 1C staff report. The recommendation reads, staff recommends City Council approve the consultant agreement with Sanderson Stewart to complete the 5th Avenue North Corridor feasibility study. Is the proposed is the recommendation in the staff report. Or Chris Kukulski, you wanted to chime in here?
The comment I was going to make was going to be in a broader sense, not specifically to Ms. Purington's question, was that, I mean, I think it's fairly clear this part of town is not highest and best use. So the opportunity to try to figure out how to redevelop it in a very positive way so it returns to a greater asset to our community is part of what this planning process is about. Whether you don't want to do it, that would be fine, but then it's going to, I think that this is to be a catalyst component to, along with the eBird, along with the plans to improve Metra, how do we interconnect it, as has been stated earlier, to the core area? This is a part of that type of study. And it opens up that dialogue, continues that dialogue, because this is not new, continues that dialogue with those property owners as it's evolving. So I would encourage you to consider moving it forward as something that, unfortunately, probably it may take another decade before you truly see the outcome of some of what you start now. But if you don't start it now, it's 20 years from now instead of 10 years from now. So.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion on the substitute motion before we proceed to a vote? Seeing none, we will proceed to a vote. This is a substitute motion, meaning that if it passes, it replaces the original motion. So this substitute motion is for approval consistent with the staff recommendation. All in favor of the substitute motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor, council members Boyette, Cole, Yakowicz, Shaw, Chiriki, Ronning, Joy, and Brown and Neese. Those in opposition to the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in opposition, Councilmember Purington and Councilmember Ewald. Motion passes. Moving then on to item 1E, right-of-way, vacating the alley right-of-way, La Ray subdivision. Councilmember Ewald, that was your separation. Would you like to start us off?
Thank you, Mayor. I separated this to get some questions answered about what's going in. Is it going to be city, county, whatever, right-of-ways? My first question, I guess, is city owns part of the alley, half the alley, county owns the other half of the alley. So is the project going in as a city project or a county project?
Okay, we'll ask staff to comment. I see Debbie Melling getting on board. I'll turn it over to Debbie. Chris Kukulski, unless you'd like to say anything. Okay, it's Debbie, it's all yours. Debbie is our city engineer for anybody who's watching.
Thank you. Councilmember Ewald, Mayor and Council, there will be additional information on the whole project that's here for the actual vacation. With just the petition here, we don't have a full packet for you yet of everything, and we don't even know everything that's happening at this point. When it develops, though, the parcel to the north that this actually vacates to is in the city. It's a city parcel as is, and so it would be developed as a city parcel. The alley is running between two different sets of properties owned by different property owners. And you'll see in the petition packet that they have signed off, the property owners to the south have actually signed off for this vacation to the property to the north. So that's kind of where it is. As of now, we've heard it's a dry storage facility. And we, like I said, we'll have a little bit more information on the actual vacation item when it comes forward.
Okay, and so Debbie, just clarifying, this is not approval of the vacation of the alleyway, just acknowledging the receipt, which is a technical requirement in the annexation statutes. Is that correct?
Yeah, in the vacation. This is a petition to vacate. And so it is just the acknowledgement. You're right.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Councilmember Chiriki, and then Councilmember Neese.
If you hit the space bar and you're on a different window, something else happens. Mr. Mayor, I would like to move that we acknowledge the receipt of the petition to vacate the alley right away in the Luray subdivision.
Motion made. Is there a second? Councilmember Neese says the second. Then discussion on the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion, Councilmember Neese?
Thank you. Now I'll ask my question now that the motion's been made. But Debbie, if the council votes this down, I mean, what's the consequences to the city? I mean, we get an application, we have to receive it, correct? Or can we say, no, I'm sorry, we're not accepting your application?
If you don't acknowledge the receipt or set a public hearing, I'm going to let Brent or Chris weigh in on that because I've honestly never had that question come up. Does anybody know what the statute says off the top of your head?
I don't, Brent. If you want to jump in, I'm presuming this is a required component.
Yes, Your Honor, Council, I would highly recommend that you go ahead with this tonight and have a hearing. I think somebody can argue that without at least an opportunity to be heard, that they are not being provided the full array that is allowed by statute. I'm not trying to tell you how to vote. I'm just telling you in this case, we're simply acknowledging the request to vacate. And tonight is just that, an acknowledgement. You're not voting on the merits of the alley vacation.
excuse me, just follow up, Mayor.
Councilmember Neese.
So Brent, with that, it's the acknowledgement of the petition to vacate, so they're petitioning, but can't we deny the petition because we don't feel there's enough information to even consider it?
Your Honor, Council Member Neese, that would be at the next stage where you actually have a hearing on the merits of the request to vacate the alley.
Okay, so there really is nothing we can consider right now. We have to approve this.
That would be my recommendation, that you're simply acknowledging that in the future a hearing will be held where the merits of the alley vacation will be discussed, and the public as well as you folks can certainly weigh in and discuss and ultimately decide whether or not you want to vacate that alley.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Brent Brooks. The only thing I might comment here is, because we always do just acknowledge the receipt, if we thought that this was a real problem going forward, we could develop, I suppose, criteria for when we will and when we will not accept and acknowledge receipt. And if some completeness requirement were built into those standards, maybe we could just refuse to receive it. But I would suggest we would need to have a little clearer standard about what our standard is, so we had something to apply in choosing not to acknowledge receipt. Any other discussion? And we do have a motion by Councilmember Treaky, seconded by Councilmember Neese for approval, i.e. acknowledging receipt of this petition. Is there any other discussion? Councilmember Ewell.
Thank you, Mayor. So if we acknowledge this tonight, then it comes back, what, in 2 weeks?
Debbie?
I think the date we put on there is a month, and the reason is there's a 15-day advertisement period. So usually it comes back in not the next one, but the following.
And so there's going to be a lot more clarity on, is this all going to be in the city? Is part of it going to be in the county? Can we force it to be in the city? Because part of it's in the city, right-of-ways on Lincoln Lane and things like that. Is that all going to be ironed out and spelled out for us when it comes back to us, or are we going to have to dig into it and find out those answers then? Or is it going to be complete when it comes back?
No, when we actually bring the vacation to you, we'll have a complete packet. It'll have the cost, it'll have the appraisal on the land. There was a discussion about possibly looking at right-of-way on Lincoln in exchange. We'll have that in there. And then anything that the petitioner wants to do, they will propose, they can tell us what is they want to do with it. I don't believe it is a requirement of a vacation that they tell us what they're going to do with it, but if they want us to approve it, I think it would be in their best interest to give you as much information as they can. So we'll have all of that in the packet that we are presented with.
Okay, thank you, Debbie.
I saw Wyeth Friday, our planning director, wanted to comment. Wyeth.
Just if I might, Mayor, thank you, Mayor and Council. Just to add, I got an email from Councilmember Purinton earlier today on a question on the property. So this kind of pertains to that question. The property, as Debbie described, the property to the north is already in the city. It's zoned community commercial. Property to the south of this alley is in the county. It is now zoned community commercial. It went through a county zoning process late last year and was zoned to community commercial as well. And so again, can't tell you exactly what they might develop or build there. There was discussion at the time of the county zone change process that they were looking at some kind of mini storage type development, but don't know for sure if that's where it's going. And this was coming, they had mentioned this during that process about the alley, pursuing this. So now that's what's going on. So that's, just wanted to add that to your information. And maybe they'll provide some more of that detail at the vacation. So thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other discussion before we proceed to a vote? If not, the motion again is in favor of receipt of the petition. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor is everyone, and so the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. That then brings us to item 1H1, bills for April 20th, 2020. Councilmember Brown will be abstaining from this. Is there a motion pertaining to item 1H1? Councilmember Treaky.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the bills for April 20th, 2020.
Second by Councilmember Boyette. Discussion, any discussion? If not, all in favor of approval of item 1H1, please raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously with the exception of Councilmember Brown, who is not voting. And that then concludes item 1, the consent agenda, and brings us to a regular agenda, item number 2. Tony, would you read item number 2, please?
Item number 2, withdrawal of the unexecuted development agreement with WC Commercial. Staff and Downtown Business Partnership, DBP, recommend approval. Action, approval or disapproval of staff and DBP recommendation.
Okay, it looks like we have some sort of presentation here. Chris Kukulski, I've got Brent Brooks down, but I've also see Katie Easton. How would you like to proceed?
I think I know Katie's available to answer any questions, as well as maybe some folks on the board. Brent, I apologize, we didn't work out exactly how the presentation would go, but I'd have Brent cover the introduction. I think others are here for questions, or if they have any comments, they're welcome to make them. But I think they're here for questions.
Okay, we'll start off with Brent Brooks, and then if Executive Director Downtown Billings Partnership, Katie Easton, or their board president, Andy Patton, has something to add, we'll give them an opportunity. But we'll begin with Brent Brooks. Brent.
Thank you, Honored Council. You had this originally on your March 23rd meeting agenda, and there were some lingering questions concerning the proposed withdrawal of the grant funding that actually occurred in 2017 for WC Commercial, or alternatively referred to as the Stillwater Building. And most of the knowledge of the past couple of years' discussions centered upon a required development agreement in order to utilize the tax increment financing funds that were allocated to WC Commercial in the Stillwater Building. And of course, Katie Easton and then Andy Patton, board chair, both been involved in the negotiation and the drafting of the development agreement. The mayor specifically on March 23rd asked if there was any legal consequences if this grant funding was withdrawn, which is of course what's on for decision tonight, as it was on March 23rd. And my short answer would be no, because the document is what we call executory. That's a fancy way of saying the parties have not agreed to the content of the development agreement. The specific details I would leave to Katie Easton, DBA Executive Director, and then Andy Patton, who's a local attorney, and then is EVP Board Chair. So with that brief introduction, I'll just shut up, and I will let either Katie or Andy, as they desire, Your Honor, with your permission, perhaps you could call them Katie first, and then I believe both Katie and Andy are prepared to make any comments and answer any questions more specifically, since they've been in on this from the initial 2017 timeframe.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll open it up to Katie Easton and Andy. So Katie, is there anything that you'd like to add to Brent's presentation?
Mayor and Council, thank you so much. My name is Katie Easton. I'm the CEO of the Downtown Billings Alliance. I don't have anything specifically to add. I'm here for questions. If there is any need to give a brief timeline of the process to what brought us to where we are today, we're happy to do that. But I would rely on Andy to possibly carry the bulk of the questions, as he is an attorney here in Billings and did help us draft this agreement starting over 2.5 years ago at this point. So I'm happy to take your lead, Andy, in whatever you'd like to do, and then again, open it up for council for questions to help clarify.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll ask Andy Patton if he has anything he'd like to add.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We've had a continuing discussion and effort with the owner of the Stillwater Building, Mr. Holden, to get him to sign a development agreement. he objects to a particular portion of the development agreement that requires that the building stay in at least 50% private ownership and therefore be taxed, subject to property tax. I know he claims or argues that this is a new condition that's been imposed on him. He provided some documents to the council, I think today, or to the city today. And I'd like to just kind of walk through those real quickly. The first one is the city's recommendation for the approval of the grant. This is from a meeting dated October 23rd, 2017. And it contains three provisions, three conditions for approval. And the third one is really the critical one. And there were two issues that were involved. One of them is that the building be at least 50% occupied during the period of reimbursement of the dispersal of the grant. The second was that the reimbursement could not begin until January 1st, 2019. And the third kind of has two or three subparts. One of the first subpart is that during the 3 years of reimbursement, the building must have and maintain no less than 50% occupancy. The second part is that it says further comment, at least 50% of the building must be owned by a taxable private sector entity or entities. And then the third part of the third condition is that no more than 50% of the building can be owned by the public sector or non-taxable entities. The issue is the 50% that must be owned by a taxable entity. In the development agreement, the time period for that is 21 years. That's based on an archaic medieval English law called the Rule Against Perpetuities. As it was approved by the city, I believe it would have violated the Rule Against Perpetuities, limiting its application to 21 years meets that term. Mr. Holden objects to the saying that it's a new condition, but actually the 21 years reduces the extent of the requirement that it be held in public or private ownership, at least 50% for 21 years. Another document that he attached, and I'm not really sure where this comes from, but it has a water stamp on the front page that says template. And I think that, I think Mr. Holden misreads that because that has two conditions. One, that it must be 50% occupied. And the second, that the development can't transfer ownership to more than 50% of the Stillwater building to a tax exempt entity. And then it has a part that says that if you violate either one or the other or the other, then we can claw back and recover no less than $500,000 from the developer. That language, that clawback language, has never been included in the development agreement that's been submitted to Mr. Holden. In any event, he was provided a development agreement, I think well over a year ago, and he won't sign it. And so what the Downtown Billings Partnership wants to do is withdraw from this so that we have the funds available to use for other purposes and grants downtown.
Okay, thank you very much. There's no other staff presentation or DVP presentation. We'll open it up either for questions of any of the speakers or a motion. How would the council like to proceed? Councilmember Boyette.
I'd like to make a motion, if that's okay.
Please.
I'd like to have a motion to withdraw of the unexecuted development agreement with WC Commercial.
Okay, thank you very much. Motion seconded, Councilmember Joy. Okay, discussion on the motion. Councilmember Purrington and Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Andy. I'm glad that you explained a few of those items. I think that the big issue that I've had with this the whole time was just not getting that timeline. I had requested some of these documents, the earlier development agreement, then I think there was a second one that must have been the 2018 agreement. So for us to be able to judge whether or not there was that disparity from what the partnership has said, what Mr. Holden has said, I find it very confusing that there are elements. You said that this one clawback was never part of the agreement, Andy. So I'm really confused as to, I don't know who to believe at this point. That's the best way to put it.
If I may, Councilwoman Purrington, there was discussion of a clawback, and I believe that the downtown partnership never approved it with a clawback. The notion was if the money was put to improve the building, then we got the benefit of that bargain, as long as it stayed at least half taxable. So I really don't know where this document, the one page that has template water stamped on it, comes from. There's handwritten on the bottom, it says draft as prepared by Greg Kruger, January of 2018. Mr. Kruger left his position at the downtown Billings partnership he retired in December of 2017. So I just don't know where this particular document came from. I do know that there's been multiple drafts of a development agreement. And since I was at least involved in looking at the drafts, the first thing I suggested was that we change the perpetual requirement that it be in at least 50% taxable ownership and limit that to 21 years, which is an attempt to comply with this ancient English law.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Purington, follow up, and then Councilmember Neese, I think I had said.
So as a follow-up, if I understand the 50% occupancy of a public entity, as far as I'm concerned, ever since I came on council, this has been part of the discussion, was that the city would become either owner, leaser, not coming to those agreements as of yet, but that wouldn't that have done away with this agreement, even if the city had, taken ownership or leased most of the building?
So I'm not sure I fully understand your question, Councilman Purrington, but so the occupancy requirement is distinct from the ownership requirement. So right now the county occupies it, but it's owned by WC Development, so it's a taxing authority. If more than 50% of the building was sold to the city, then it would violate the agreement.
Right.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. And Brent, this may be a question for you, but I looked into this in March when it was first coming to, and I won't support this motion. I think that we're asking for trouble on this. I read the minutes from the Downtown Billings Association, and I also read what the council approved at that time. And you're correct, there is not a 21-year stated, and I can see the problem where a council approves something that is illegal. Brent, why would this issue not come back to the council to be corrected, so that then we could have this corrected on the record, instead of now 3 years later with parties upset between each other where a document's not been executed? Why?
Your Council, Councilmember Neese, think the documents did originate with the downtown partnership. And I think what Mr. Patton is trying to explain is that actually the one addition that Mr. Holden has an issue with is really to his benefit, because otherwise the document would go on in perpetuity, requiring the 50% occupancy by taxpaying entity.
I understand, but why, if it was incorrect when the council approved it, did it not come back to the council to have that corrected?
Your Honor, Councilmember Neese, I cannot explain that. Perhaps Ms. Easton or Mr. Patton could answer that. I cannot answer that.
Well, let me ask you this, Brent, if you don't mind, Mayor, if I ask a quick follow-up.
Sure. And here, Brent, I'll just tell you, it's a little difficult to hear you. So if you'd speak up as much, we're having an audio problem. We can understand what you're saying. It's just quite faint. So Councilmember Neese.
Brent, when an item like this that is approved by the council and later it's determined that it could be illegal on the approval, should that item come back to the council to be corrected?
Yeah, technically it should, Your Honor, and Councilmember Neese, but I think that's what Mr. Patton and the Downtown Partnership is trying to do here.
Well, I beg to differ. He's actually trying to withdraw it instead of fix it, but thank you.
Well, Your Honor, Council, it was trying to be fixed, and Mr. Holden objects to that repair, and perhaps Mr. Patton can elaborate upon that.
And here we'll give it to Chris Kukulski. I'll just comment that before we enter into any sort of detailed agreement, it's always good if it comes back on at least our consent agenda, so we have an opportunity to weigh in, unless we've given specific authority to the mayor or the city administrator to sign off on something. It's always good to have it come back for a final look-see. Chris Kukulski, you wanted to jump in on this, I think.
I was just going to simply comment. I think both sides in good faith have tried to move forward on this agreement, but it just hasn't happened. I've made attempts. I know Mrs. Easton has, I know the board has, and I trust Mr. Holden, who's made a significant investment downtown, had ultimately wanted to, but for whatever reason, we've not been able to come to an agreement. So the cleanest way we thought to proceed is to take any ambiguity off of the books and withdraw this and move on. And I'd say that there, as far as Councilmember Purinton's comments about City Hall, it's my speculation that that's quite late in the game. I do not think in 2017 there was much thought that the city and or the county might end up being the owner of the property, and still, as you know, quite far from that today. But I think all of this was done with the full intent and hope, especially by the owner, that this space was going to be filled with leasing entities years ago. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Ronnie and Councilmember Tricky.
Thank you. This might be a question for Katie and or Andy, either one. How many times has Mr. Holden or his attorneys been approached by the Downtown Billings Partnership to address this issue and to speak about, or have you requested meetings with Mr. Holden and his attorneys? And if so, how many times over the past year or so? And what result have you gotten? I'm assuming the result has not been positive because you're here, but what were those meetings like?
Katie or Andy Patton?
Great. Thank you, Mayor and Council and Councilmember Ronning. My records indicate that I've had no less than 5 phone conversations with Mr. Holden and his attorney, Mr. Noning. I've also met with Mr. Holden in person, one time a meeting facilitated by Commissioner Pittman, who has a great relationship with him as his leaseor. Also, I've had the opportunity to meet with I believe Chris Kukulski was there at one meeting, and those were the 2 in person, as well as Mr. Holden and his attorney have attended one partnership board meeting to meet with the board, and then the board subsequently voted to move forward with the agreement as it was written. And so that's my experience in person meeting with Mr. Holden. It's happened several times. The meetings end abruptly would be my frankest way to say that. He just has been non-communicative in as a result of all of these meetings, and that's what brings us here today, is that we just cannot continue that communication if he won't reply to our emails, to our transmitted contracts, to the memos that we've sent at this point. I would say that Mr. Holden is not limited to applying for TIF dollars for additional projects immediately in the future with this. We believe that this is one of the most important projects that's happened for downtown Billings in the past several years. This is a building that would be considered blighted by any standard with the massive amount of asbestos that was present there. So this is truly an important investment in our community, and we hope that Mr. Holden understands that we appreciate that investment that he made. Our only request is that he would just be further communicative with us on this.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Tricky.
Yeah, so this kind of a clause is kind of new to me. So I was just wondering, is this something fairly standard in our TIF development agreements? Both in terms of I guess there are really kind of three issues there: the occupancy, the tax exempt aspect of it, and then the time frame. So is this something we put in a lot of our TIF agreements?
I would ask Andy to possibly answer this question if possible, seeing as this agreement was started and the council initially awarded this grant prior to my being hired in this position. And Andy was part of the board for that. So if that's okay, Mayor, I'd ask Andy to answer. I think that's great.
Andy Patton.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Shirokee, this is unique language, I think, in these agreements. This grant was proposed on the heels of a grant that the partnership made to the Alberta Bear Theater, which was somewhat controversial, and there was criticism by some on the city council for using TIF money for a non-tax-paying purpose, and so the board was sensitive to that criticism, and also at the time there was discussion between the county and the Stillwater building for some county offices moving over the Stillwater building. And so the fundamental purpose was to make sure that this would at least be partially subject to property tax, so that a very substantial grant would have a chance of being reimbursed through increased property taxes.
Thank you very much for that history. Councilmember Yakovich.
Thank you, Honor Council. I'll support the motion. And this is a case for me, at least, as City Council. I have to rely on, our lawyer. We have to rely on TIF leadership, the board. These legalese are very important, but for me personally, I have to rely and trust the decisions in that area. However, and just to add, I'm sure we all would share, as Katie even mentioned, Joe Holden really has given $20 million to our city. And I mean, we cannot, and I appreciate us avoiding, I appreciate us going to a high level and looking at it that way, how much he's given, and took a blighted building and just restored it. So it's commendable. Not only that, then he builds a parking lot next to it. So I just hope in the conversation we don't lose context of an outstanding community leader who invested his money for the sake of our city. So I just appreciate us, and Katie, I appreciate you mentioning that as you did. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Yakovich. I'll just second, there's a lot more of the building that still has to be built out. So there is opportunity for need for a lot of additional investment there that might be eligible for TIF funding if under the right circumstances. Councilmember Ewalt and the Councilmember Neese. Councilmember Ewalt.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm looking on the same way that Danny was. It seems like none of this stuff has come up with other TIF awards that we've given. Do all TIF awards prior to this have a perpetuity where it has to remain in private hands? It can't change. The timeline, whether it's 50%, and did this all change after the Alberta Bear? And so Joe is the first one this is getting, or WC is, they're the first ones that it's getting put on. It just doesn't seem like it's following like it should be.
Councilman Ewald.
Andy Patton, you wanted to comment or briefly?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Councilman Ewald, as far as I'm aware, this is the first agreement that language has been put into. But this was the original proposal. That was what was proposed to Mr. Holden, and that was part of the deal from the very beginning.
So the follow-up, Mayor?
Councilmember Ewald, sure.
So the 21 years and all that was spelled out back in 16 or 17 when he made the first ask for the TIF money.
The 21 years wasn't. Originally, what was presented to him was that it would be perpetual. It would be forever. I suggested and I put in the development agreement when I saw it, that it would be limited to 21 years in order to make it to comply with this rule against perpetuities.
Another follow-up, please, Mayor.
Councilmember Ewald.
So I'm trying to wrap my head around this perpetuity deal. The perpetuity deal only showed up after you gave all the money to the Alberta Bear Theater, and then that became an issue for some reason. Was it spelled out there in his original contract that it was for perpetuity? And how about all these other ones downtown that we gave grants to? If they sell now and they sell to somebody that's a public entity, they're not held to that same standard.
Andy Patton, can you address that? There were really two questions. The second one was about other projects, and the first one was, I guess, whether the perpetuity element was included in some earlier version of the draft agreement.
Councilman Ewald, the rule against perpetuities is a geeky law concept that only some law students remember. I'm sure Mayor Cole remembers them and Mr. Brooks, but it's an obscure thing, and it literally goes back to 12th century England. The rule against perpetuities is a distinct issue from public and private ownership. The concept that the building had to stay in at least 50% private ownership was part of the arrangement from the very beginning. That was part of what was proposed to the downtown board. That's what was approved by the board, and that's what was presented and approved by the city. It was only changed from being perpetual and reduced, which benefited Mr. Holden the 21 years, when I saw that and it occurred to me that it would violate this rule against perpetuities. Nothing, as far as I know, we have no similar condition in other development agreements. So if we have given a grant to the Northern Hotel and the Northern Hotel became a public owned facility, then it wouldn't be taxed, and had we given a grant to the Northern, it wouldn't be affected.
Okay, we'll move on, but first, Katie Easton sounded like she wanted to weigh in on that. Katie?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just as a brief correction, if you recall, you did approve an award to the building that is now being leased to the Wise Wonders Children's Museum. It is owned by a private property owner. And part of the action item that was presented to council and that you guys did receive and approve is that they have committed to owning that building for a minimum of 10 years before having the option to sell it to the Wise Wonders Children's Museum. This was an agreement that was come to through the application process. And so this is a one case where we are making efforts to make sure that we can receive a return on our investment, if you will, but definitely do that in a way that the applicant is aware, the council is aware. And I would just briefly say that my commitment to you is that we are working to have our development agreements drafted prior to bringing any decision to city council. And so you guys will be able to see the requirements that are included in the development agreement so that your decisions can be full and made with all the complete information there. So that is our commitment to you.
Which we appreciate. Thank you very much. Councilmember Joanne, Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I will support this motion. I gave the second for it. As we remember, prior, that very large property was a federal building. And so I appreciate, I want to also commend property owners, business people who come downtown and increase property value. That's a really great thing. Prior, it was a federal building. And I do appreciate that the Downtown Billings Partnership should be looking out to creating increment. So I see this as part of their attempt to create increment, which is what they do, which is how the TIF works. So I appreciate that. At some point, sometimes two sides don't agree on something. And it sometimes comes to the point where you just have to say, we can't agree, and this has to sort of find its a conclusion. And I think this is an attempt at concluding this particular agreement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I know when all this came up, Mike and I were on council at that time, and there was absolutely a concern. I mean, the TIF districts were being kind of under fire in the legislation. We were looking at, you know, what's the return to the city if we give $1.5 million to this? If the city or the county or anybody else occupied that building, you know, what's the return on that investment? I will support this. Mr. Holden's a wise businessman. You know, if he chooses not, you know, to take this offer, then it's not the right decision for him. He knows it's not the right decision. And, you know, he knows that it's best to walk away. You know, he has every opportunity to apply going forward. I trust his judgment. I know he knows his business a whole lot better than I do. So I'm going to support it. He hasn't asked necessarily that we completely revamp the agreement. And I don't even think that that's an option at this point. So I support the motion and move on forward.
Thank you very much. Any other comments before we proceed to a vote? Councilmember Tricky.
So is this a fair summary of what happened? It looks to me that like in 2017, council set some very specific standards, and the partnership has been negotiating with the owner based on those specific 2017. And essentially the owner has said that, no, I cannot agree to what the council said it was required in 2017. Is that a fair statement?
Who's your question to?
Anybody who would remember what happened.
Yeah, I'm going to offer Andy Patton the opportunity to respond to that, and then Councilmember Neese also would like to comment. Andy Patton.
Councilman Shariki, that's exactly what's happened.
Okay, so council is essentially responsible for this, not not the partnership or necessarily Holden. We are the ones that laid down the rules for how the negotiation would go forward.
You laid down the rule that we asked you to lay down.
Yeah. Oh, you guys asked us to lay this down.
We asked you to do it. You did it. And that's what happened.
Okay. In retrospect, do you guys think that that's a little, I mean, given the economy and stuff like that, if I were looking at that, I wouldn't have signed that back in 17, much less now. That may not be a fair question. And I'm willing to let it go by, but it seems like a really stringent set of requirements for such a large building.
Appreciate your comment. We will leave it at that rather than turning that hypothetical into a discussion point. Council Member Neese, did you have something further?
I did. Thank you for recognizing me. My answer to Danny's question would be absolutely not. I do not believe the downtown boards followed what the council direction was. Joe actually sent a copy of the approval by the council. This is the same thing I looked up in March. Item number 3, part number 3 of the recommendation was during the 3-year reimbursement of the Stillwater building, they must have and maintain no less than 50% occupancy. Further, so it's continuing on talking about the 3-year period, at least 50% of the building must be owned in taxable private sector entity or entities, and no more than 50% of and then another sentence, no more than 50% of the building may be owned or by the public sector or non-taxable entities. This is all talking about the reimbursement period. It's very clear to me that the discussions within the board, when they talked about possible clawbacks, they actually removed point number 4, which they did, so it didn't show up in the agreement that Joe kind of mentioned. But it is very clear to me that they were talking about the stipulation over a 3-year period. If there was confusion about that, I believe the downtown board should have brought that to the council for clarity and then got it to Joe. When I look at what the council approved, I don't believe the Downtown Billings Association actually ever presented that to Joe for signature. And I agree, I would not have signed it either after seeing what the council had approved. And that's all Joe is pointing out, and that's what I saw back in March when I reviewed this. So I will not support this motion.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion before we proceed to vote? Councilmember Purington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't support it either. And Sean, I agree with you. I think Mr. Holden is a very astute businessman. And I think my biggest thing with this is that all I've seen from the Downtown Partnership was the letter for withdrawal. I've asked to see the agreement, which I think would have been there for us to see. So to sit there and compare some of the things, because I know that Mr. Holden has been in touch with the council and has sent, and they may be, Andy, as you said, bits and pieces of things, but I don't feel like we have the full story. And I know there's been a clash of personalities here that is unfortunate, because I think he's done a great job of, as Denise mentioned, that he's done a great job of bringing this building up to code, that it can be used, whether it's public or private. So I appreciate that in his efforts. And I just feel like for whatever reason, and I don't know the reasons, but I just cannot support withdrawing that at this point until we have better conclusion with Mr. Holden as well as the Downtown Partnership. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Brown.
So I guess the question for me is, and I don't disagree that the 3-year was the original. That's kind of what I had thought was a 3-year. However, are we able at this point to renegotiate that? I mean, that's kind of what we've presented. That's what's been presented for, gosh, I don't know, 2-3 years now. Or now are we are we suggesting that we go back and alter that agreement? Would you still not need to withdraw? How would that process work? I guess I'm at a loss there. And I don't know. I guess that would be to Brent, I suppose.
Okay, Brent Brooks, the question was, and Councilmember Brown can clarify this, but if we wanted to somehow continue these discussions for some clarification or modification of what the development agreement might look like, how would that process work? I guess that's my interpretation of the question.
Governor and Councilmember Brown, that certainly if the council directs that, I'm sure that Ms. Easton and Mr. Patton will try once again to do that. I'm not sure how successful that would be, but if that is the council's direction, I would certainly be happy to assist them, and perhaps they would like to comment as well.
Okay, Chris Kukulski.
This is about as uncomfortable as a way to try to negotiate something as I think you could come up with. Mr. Holden has not been working with us to try to resolve this dispute, this disagreement. I have been at downtown partnership meetings where he and his attorney was. I've had lunch with him, with other downtown leaders. You get information today at what time? Similarly, you got information from him the day, I think, of the last council meeting. And all due respect, I think he is an astute business person. He's looking out for his best interest, period. It is time for us to move on and not leave $1.5 million hung up in this fashion. As I stated, he can reapply, but I don't find generally any of the intent of the council in the past as being something wrong. It was a federal building that wasn't collecting any taxes. So it's reasonable that there were some of these provisions tied to it. It takes two parties to want to work together to figure this out. And this has gone on long enough. I think you need to pass this motion tonight. And then if some new opportunity presents itself, then see what that brings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Ronning.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate your input on that. I love that building. I grew up in the Batten building, and I guess it's the Stillwater building now, but love that building. And I agree with Denise, agree with Councilman Yakowicz. A lot of credit to Mr. Holden and his partners for putting their dollars into that building. And I hope that they do get a return on their investment and get some good renters in there. I'm a little concerned that they haven't got renters so far, but I hope that they do. But I do have some concerns that my question was, how many times have the parties met with the downtown Billings partnership? How many times have they come together to work this out in the past 3 years? And I'm a little concerned by the answer we got that Mr. Holden has been unresponsive. And then I've heard from 2 council members that Mr. Holden's reached out to them. So that I find a little concerning. I hope that the parties moving forward, which would be the downtown business partnership or Billings partnership, and Mr. Holden can work this out. I'm not really sure reaching out to individual council members without going to the downtown Billings partnership and trying to get that worked out is the way to do it. But that's a little concerning to me. So I hope that they can get worked out, but yeah, I definitely support this motion and hope that that building can get some really great renters in it, because it is a great building. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any council member who hasn't addressed this question would like to comment? Not seeing anybody, so we'll go to people who have spoken. Councilmember Tricky, or Councilmember Neese, I saw first, then Councilmember Tricky.
Thank you, Mayor. If this was before us and it had the 3-year time and not the 21-year time, and he had not signed it, I would fully support this motion. And Sean, I believe you mentioned that was the expectation of the council at the time. It was 3 years. As I read it and looked at the minutes back in March, that's what I got from it too. So
Roy,
Okay.
let me confirm, I am not speaking for the entire council at that time.
Right. No,
It was
yes.
my understanding
Yeah,
that
I
it
thank
was
you. for-
3-year, and then the legal part was it turned into the 21.
Right. And thank you for clarifying it. And I agree that because as I went back in March and read the minutes, and that's what I kind of concluded too from the discussions and reading in this. So I am not, if he had, like I say, if he had not had done this, I just don't want to put the city or the downtown Billings Association at risk for not doing something the council directed them to. If we directed our city administrator to do something, or the city's some department do something, they didn't do it, then we would have to address it with the city administrator to make sure it was done like the council had asked them to be doing. In this case, I look at this exactly the same way. It's in essence that because it does actually state 3 years in what the council recommended, if there was any kind of clarification or confusion on that, and when the attorney Andy came and said, hey, listen, I'm reading this as perpetuity, but it says 3 years, then it should have come back for the council for clarification and then approval at that time. 2017, we would have had it resolved, and then if he decided not to sign it at that time, council had already made the decision. So I think we should re-present it to him at 3 years like the council approved. And not withdraw. I think we're going to get the city and the Downtown Billings Association in trouble if we withdraw something we never actually even presented after it was approved.
Okay, Councilmember Tricky.
Has Mr. Holden ever made a counter offer to any of the people who've been involved in the negotiations with them?
Chris Kukulski, and then if Chris wants to pass it to Katie or Andy, we can do that. Chris.
To my knowledge, certainly nothing formally. I've been in meetings where we have asked that. Do you have some type of a counter? Would you suggest some other time period? And I don't believe he's ever made a counter proposal of anything other. So, Katie, if I'm misspeaking there, but I think that's what.
I would agree.
And Andy Patton.
And I've spoken to his counsel, Mark Nonig, multiple times about this too. They were invited to the meeting where we made the final decision. The Downtown Partnership made the final decision, and they didn't come to that either.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Joy, then we should move toward a vote. Yes.
Just to clarify, Councilmember Neese said that the reimbursement is over a 21-year period of time. I did not understand that. I understood that 21 years is the amount of time that it would have to be held in that situation of profit, nonprofit. Am I correct?
Yeah, apologize if I said reimbursement over 21 years. Did not mean that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. I'll jump in here. I certainly want to endorse Councilmember Neese's observations that when there was some ambiguity in this process, it would have been best for council to weigh in sooner rather than later and bring some clarity. And I would encourage us to do that if this comes up in the future. And also to have very clear rules about at what point we have an agreement with any sort of a TIF applicant. And Katie Easton's promise that they will come with an agreement, a very specific proposed agreement, I think is very important as we move forward with a similar process. I will vote in favor of the motion to withdraw from further negotiations here for 3 reasons. One is even though I have not done any sort of detailed analysis, it is my expectation and understanding that there was, through the course of conduct of these parties and in the past, an expectation that there would be a detailed development agreement signed, and that just never happened. And those are always going to be subject to discussions and negotiations. So that's an important point. The second is that to Councilmember Neese's point, which I think is a very important question, which was how long was this 50% private ownership supposed to last? Looking at the October 23rd, 2017 staff report, the third condition actually has two different conditions in it. And the very first one clearly makes reference to that 3-year period. It says, during the 3 years of reimbursement, the Stillwater building must have and maintain no less than 50% occupancy. That 3-year period was to take place from January 1st, 2019 through 2020, and then into 2021. So that's pretty clear. 50% occupancy for that first 3-year period. Then it continues and says, further, at least 50% of the building must be owned by taxable private sector entity or entities. That sentence does not make any reference to the 3 years. And so I guess that's the source of the difference of agreement. Arguably not the best drafting of this staff report, but that's why it's important to have some sort of final written agreement between the parties. So I'm clarifying that, but I wouldn't say that 3 years necessarily applied to that second condition. But then finally, the third point I am interested in, and there hasn't been any discussion of that, and that is that there is no doubt that the very first part of that condition, namely the 50% occupancy during the 3-year period, has never occurred and never has come close to occurring. The building has 4 stories, and only roughly 60 or 70% of one floor is occupied. That's not some technicality. It's a very important fundamental point, because if you get to 50% occupancy, that means that 50% has been built out, raising the taxable value of the property and the increment. And that has, again, never come close to occurring. And so the condition has never been satisfied under that, those conditions are described in that staff report. So those are my thoughts. And any other comments? I don't want to pretend to have the last word, but we will proceed to a vote if there isn't any other comment. If not, then the motion of Councilmember Boyette was to approve the withdrawal consistent with the staff recommendation. All in favor of that, please raise your hand. Voting in favor, Councilmember Boyette, Cole, Yakowicz, Shaw, Tariki, Joy, Brown, and Ronning. If opposed, please raise your hand. Voting in opposition, Councilmembers Purington, Ewalt, and Neese. Motion passes. Thank you very much. It's 7:39. We'll take a short break, but Councilmember Yakowicz, did you want to comment before we do so? No, that's what you were going to suggest. Okay. We will do that then. It's, again, 7:39. If we can come back close to 7:45, we'll try to get started as close to that as we can. We are adjourned for about 6-7 minutes. Looks like we're all back. I think we're all back. So we will continue our deliberations. We're on item number 3. Tony, if you're still with us, would you read item number 3?
Item number 3, resolution authorizing the issuance and negotiated sale of tax increment bonds. Staff recommends approval. Action, approval or disapproval of staff recommendation.
Thank you very much. Is Andy going to make a presentation here? Yes. So Andy Zeller, City Finance Director, it's all yours.
All right. Tony, can you either make me co-host or enable screen sharing, please? Okay, there we go. All right, Mayor and Council, good evening. I'm trying to open up so I can see all of you guys. All right, there we go. And you can all see my PowerPoint slides, I hope. Okay, I'm just gonna run them like this because it switches screens and doesn't seem to work properly otherwise. But this evening, what you're being asked to approve is called a parameters resolution. This is the passage of this resolution authorizes myself to go and issue bonds within parameters that you've approved for a specific purpose. You're all aware this this resolution sets out that defines the projects and will extend the life of the tax increment district according to state statute. I just want to make sure that's clear on the outset, and we'll go through kind of the general process here. It's a pretty brief presentation. There are 2 projects that would be funded with the bond sale. One is to convert North 29th and North 30th from one-way streets to two-way streets. The other and smaller portion would be to upgrade, replace the parking garage gate control equipment in our 3 parking garages. The staff memo talked about both these projects, talked about the parking garage project in greater detail as that hadn't been presented prior to this as a portion of the project. The way you could fund these projects, there are really kind of 2 ways or a combination of the 2. You can borrow money or you can save money over time and then do the projects at a later date. Obviously, you could combine the 2 as well. Currently, there isn't significant increment to pay for the project, or cash on hand, I should say, to pay for these projects. So as of today, borrowing is really the only option. Plus, as you're aware, we wanted to make sure council was aware that this sunset date for extending the life of the district is fast approaching. And should that be a desire of the council, we wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to act on that. The parameters resolution really sets out 3, I'd say 3 important parameters for you to be aware of. One is the aggregate principal amount at $3 million, meaning we can't sell bonds more than $3 million. A maximum interest rate of 5%, again, meaning that can't enter into an agreement then if the interest rate is greater than 5%. And then this one is important, maximum term of the bonds, which sets the final payment on July 1 of 2044. So you could approve the resolution as is, and that would adopt those parameters. You also have, this question's been asked kind of in various formats from different council members. You have the opportunity to modify the parameters. For example, you could make a motion to adjust the principal amount if you didn't want to do one or any of the projects. I guess if you didn't want to do any of the projects, you would probably just deny the parameters resolution. If you still want to do the projects but not bond, we would need to find another funding mechanism, which isn't currently available today, but may be in the future. You could also adjust the term of the bonds. Some discussion has been asked if you could proceed with the project and not extend the life of the district. that's an option. Currently, the Empire bonds, which are the longest standing or outstanding bonds at the downtown or in the downtown district, the final payment is July 1st, 2038. We could amend this resolution to marry up with that date, proceed with the projects. However, it wouldn't extend the life of the district. Extending the life of the district would capture about 5 more years. And in today's increment, that's about $3 million a year or $15 million in projects that won't occur if we don't extend the life of the district. Now, I highly suspect that amount will grow, but as to what amount, I can't predict. This picture you guys have seen before, but really it just kind of spells out the timeline for this district as it currently is. Statute sets out 15 years in which you can sell bonds. And then after that point, you can still sell bonds, but you can't have the term of the bonds longer than your longest outstanding bonds. So if we, in 2026, decide to sell bonds, the final payment will be 2039. We can't extend the life after this date here, year 15, which, as you're aware, is fast approaching. If we sell bonds in this year, we would capture these last 5 years of increment available within the district. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. I believe that Debbie and Wyeth are here also, and Katie as well. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Andy, very much. Do we have questions for staff before we look for a motion? Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Andy, I think we saw this a little bit a couple of weeks ago, and there was a certain different dollar amount. Well, how much, and I didn't see it in the memo, maybe I'm missing it here, but how much was for the two-way streets and how much was for the parking?
Yeah, the estimate is around $2 million for the two-way streets. We don't have bids yet. We won't be selling bonds until we have bids. I believe that's correct. Yes, we're going to open bids, and Debbie can kind of chime in on that if we need to. But yeah, we have an estimate of $1.92 million at this point on the two-way street conversion, about $500,000 on the parking garage installation. We will have additional costs for bond counsel and financial, it's not a financial advisor, but underwriter. And then we have a little bit in there for kind of contingency for increase in construction costs.
Okay, and Mayor, just quick follow-up.
Sure.
Andy, you mentioned that there's additional information on the parking structures. Was that a separate presentation in the memo? Because I just saw the paragraph about the in the memo, not an actual separate presentation.
I apologize if I said presentation. I meant there's more information about that in the staff memo.
Okay.
But I'm not aware of a prior presentation on that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Andy, while we have you, during the public comment period, there was a question from Scott Wetzel, whose business is on 30th, about the public participation process for the conversion to two-ways. Chris Kelsey is holding up his hand, so I'll turn it to Chris to comment on that and how that process might work out. And specifically, if we approve this tonight, assuming call it a worst case scenario, and we decided not to move ahead with that project, are we somehow committed to that project with what we're doing tonight is kind of an obvious question. Chris Kukulski, can you comment? Chris, you're muted.
Apologize. Unfortunately, due to the timing of needing to do the renewal by the statutory deadline, which unfortunately we thought was a year from now instead of this year, we do have this compressed timeline. In talking to Wyeth earlier today, we will still continue to do that public engagement process. Ideally, that'll be finished up through the summer and into the fall, and then we would have brought this project forward in the fall and winter. But because we need to make at least the decision to take the opportunity to expand it now, we're not going to change that timeline. We're still going to engage the public in this, but unfortunately, this decision about borrowing, we need to make. Andy, can you answer as to what if you say yes tonight, we go through the public process and the public just says, you know what, we change our minds. This just isn't a really good idea to change these one-ways. What would happen with regard to, I'm assuming until we literally borrow the money, we can kind of change course there.
Kind of two things. One, we've identified the project as the one we will use the bond proceeds on. So I think you really commit to that once you approve this parameters resolution. If we close on the bonds, and I think the action tonight is really going to is your final decision on the bonding. If you approve this tonight, we will be borrowing the money, and at that point, you have, I believe it's 18 or 24 months to spend that money, or you start paying penalties on to the IRS on that. And you really don't have a lot of latitude to switch projects from what we've kind of outlined here in the parameters resolution. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thanks, Andy.
Yeah.
For that clarification. It does. And let me just touch on one other thing. So in part in answering your question, Mayor, on the one hand, it's unfortunate the timing, the way it's worked out, because we would have liked to have done all that downtown engagement as one of the business owners there pointed out, and we want to continue to that. I will remind you, though, that all the analysis and the study that was done regarding the one-ways, which has been done numerous times over, I think, a decade plus, have come to the same conclusion that I've seen many, many studies around the country conclude, that these one-way streets are not good for property values. They're not good for business. They're good for moving traffic. So I empathize and I really respect the business owners' desire to be more publicly engaged. I don't think they missed those meetings. They're still coming up. But I would say with confidence that the evidence is there that they will see a better business environment, and thus us overall a better tax environment in the downtown as we turn one-ways back into two-way streets and promote pedestrian and better access to retailers, restaurants, et cetera.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Thank you, Andy. I'll just, my interpretation, Andy, of your answer is that by proceeding tonight, we are not locked into the one-way to two-way conversion, but our options to obtain funding may be limited or will be limited by what we do tonight. We could not radically depart from this resolution without jeopardizing our ability to sell bonds under this resolution.
Mayor, I apologize. I don't follow there. If you do approve this resolution tonight, the money needs to be used for those projects.
Are you saying if we approve this resolution, we have to approve the one-way to two-way conversion?
Yeah.
Don't we have the option to just not go out to the market and try to buy bonds?
Well, that's what this action is directing staff to do. So if you don't want to go and sell bonds for this project, then don't pass the resolution. If you do want to proceed with the project through bonding, then this is the step that will do that. You will see one more action to approve the bond resolution, but your options at that point, as long as it's within the parameters, are to approve it, or else you'd likely end up in court. But this is your action. This is your opportunity to proceed or not.
And are you saying staff does not have any discretion in the timing of going to the market?
Well, if the intent is to extend the life of the district, we have very little discretion in that time. We need to have the bonds. We need to have the money in our hands by June 30, and that process we will have to go to market, make sure it coincides with bids, and then sell the bonds.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I didn't know that June 30th deadline date, so that's a very important piece of information. Thank you. Other questions for staff or motion? Councilmember Yakwish, Councilmember Purington.
Yes, Your Honor, I'm going to make the motion to approve resolution authorizing the issuance and negotiate sale of tax increment bonds as recommended by staff.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Shaw is making the peace signs, so I saw that. Okay, discussion on the motion. Council Member Brown and then Councilmember Neese.
So, Andy, if we don't do the two-way and we just do the parking garage, is that not enough to extend the life of that district, or does it need to be the full 3 million?
You don't have to. No, there's no requirement that the amount be 3 million. If you wanted to proceed with only the parking garage portion, the challenge with that is the term of the bonds can't exceed the useful life of what you're using the proceeds for. And it gets a little confusing when you're doing multiple projects. But in this case, if you were just to do the parking garage equipment, likely that useful life is less than 25 years. So you couldn't bond for 25 years. But when the majority is going for a street project, there's a math formula that you use, but generally that's the life that you're using to gauge useful life. So in short answer, you couldn't do a 25-year bond for parking garage gate control equipment only.
Okay, thanks, Andy.
Yep.
Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to hear from Brent Brooks, if you don't mind, because Andy brought up some things that I had not considered or didn't know that once this is approved, we have to move forward with the project. Are we skipping public comment in some way on this project? If in some fashion, I know there was the two-way street study and that was all approved by the council, but is there something that we're skipping here?
The honored council, not that I'm aware of. I mean, we do have to approve this resolution before those projects move forward. If I understand your question correctly, Councilmember Neese.
So just to clarify, we're approving the project and the funding before we know what the bids are. And so what happens if the bids come in? I'm sure they did a good job on the bids, but it's a little concerning that we're kind of getting the cart before the horse on this, where we haven't actually got bids in there and we've approved the project. And I guess, Chris, I'll go answer this question. You said we didn't realize there's a year. You are our city administrator. What is it? What failed to not get this to us in time that we can actually put bids out and really look at this, so we don't have to rush it through? Like anytime you make a rush, I'm concerned we're going to make a mistake.
So first of all, I don't think the issue of the bids is really out of whack, out of timing. It's not uncommon at all to make the estimate, start to set up the financial components, and open the bids between now and the actual time that you award them or make the borrow. I think the step that I referenced about public input was not a legal one. We have covered the legal basis of public meetings, public notices, these things. But ideally, we do want to do more community engagement downtown for this particular set of projects of 29th and 30th, and talking with those businesses specifically, timing, schedule, and all the evidence that's come through the one-way studies that show this is going to be good for business and good for downtown Billings. That's the part that we would, if we weren't under this time crunch, which I'm responsible for, we thought, for whatever reason, it was my understanding we had until next July 1 or June 30 of 2021 to potentially extend the life of this. And then it was discovered, I'm going to say maybe sometime in the last 6, 8, 12 months, whoa, actually it's this summer that has to be done. So this has been worked on for many, many months, but we thought we had an extra year from where we actually ended up with.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Councilmember Ewald.
Thank you, Mayor. So let me understand this. We're going to try and pass something tonight. And then we're going to go to the business owners. And if 75% of them say, we like our one-way streets, then we're going to tell them, well, no, you don't, because we passed this. And so now you have to like two-way streets. Is that what I'm hearing?
So I'm going to ask Wyeth to help me with what I don't know about the history in Billings. That is, I think what you're saying, Frank, is a reasonable way to look at it. I'll also tell you in 21 years, I've never heard anyone other than a traffic engineer say they wanted one-way streets with traffic that just wants to fly through your downtown. So I know it doesn't sound good the way you laid it out, but that would be a very departure from a lot of evidence as to what the value is for retail and business operations along those one-ways. Wyeth, can you help with what's going on in downtown Billings to get it to the point where we are today?
And I apologize, I'm just going to jump in here. I'm going to give it to Wyeth in just a second, but I'll just comment for the benefit of the council that Katie Easton will want to comment as well, because there has been a public participation process informally conducted by the Downtown Billings Association. We heard at their DBP meeting on the end of last week that they'd received a number of positive comments from property owners on 29th, I believe. One who was agnostic, I believe. Less input from anybody on 30th. So we'll just want to hear what that process has generated so far. But we can do that later. For now, though, we'll turn it over to Wyeth. Wyeth?
Mayor and council, and yeah, and I'll be brief because that's correct. And we've been aware of that. That was part of the effort between the downtown staff, the city staff, and all as this has been moving forward, was to do as much outreach as possible with the property owners along those streets to let them know what was going on, because going back to this whole issue, we were ahead of where we were looking at being for an overall outreach and prioritization effort, public outreach and prioritization effort for the downtown pedestrian and traffic safety study, and to carry that through the, and Chris already explained that in terms of the timing. That's underway right now. There's going to be a survey going out. The consultants have already met with the Heights Task Force, with Rotary. There's been some engagement, but it's just this, because of the timing of trying to move forward with this extension and the way to bond this, we're just a little bit off on that based on that timing. I do want to say that the idea of the outreach and public participation and prioritization was really to take the elements and the information in the downtown, the technical study, and explain and share it with the community and talk about what's low-hanging fruit, what are opportunities we might be able to do in the short term, like this project, obviously the way this is being looked at, or more complicated longer-term projects, funding sources, et cetera. It wasn't just to take a vote or anything of who wants or who doesn't want. It was to explain and educate about it, and then talk about what could we do in the short term, what could we do in the long term, et cetera. But the idea was to engage not even just downtown property owners, the community in general about this, because it's a benefit that can be far-reaching across the community. So anyway, that's kind of where that's at, and we're in that process. COVID-19 slowed us down on some of that outreach. It's moving forward. You're going to be hearing a lot about it here in the next month or two, and then by the end of the summer, we'll have that completed.
Okay, thank you very much, Wyeth. Katie, I did mention your name. Would you mind just commenting on what we know from business property owners along those two streets?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor and Council. I appreciate the opportunity. Just to very quickly, I did ask for some statistics from my team. On 29th, we have made actual contact with 20 out of the 30 identified property owners. 20 out of 30 that we've contacted have said, yes, this is a project that they're interested in seeing happen. We've reached, let's see, 7 out of 28 identified property owners on 30th have said yes, they are interested. We have spoken with Mr. Wetzel a couple different times, and we feel that it's not so much that he's against the idea altogether, but definitely wants it to be done correctly and wants to be involved in the process. And so we've listed him as a maybe. And I think that there was one identified no, but it was more along the lines of just not understanding the process of this. So we are constantly and consistently still reaching out to identified property owners. We would expect, if I were to guess, that we would receive a majority of positive support for this project. So that's the statistics that I can offer, and we'll continue that process.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Neese and Councilmember Purington.
Thank you, Mayor. Katie, did the TIF board review this and approve both of these projects? Because I didn't see that in any of the material that came up the last time.
Mayor and Council and Councilmember Neese, we've discussed extensively the process of extending the lifespan of our TIF district in our board meetings. I would say that has been the main conversation, and that was approved to go forward. The specific projects, we have talked about the 1 to 2-way street conversions, have not taken a direct action vote on that project. And then the parking controls is a newer aspect to this project that our board would be amenable to, but we haven't asked them to take an action vote on that. We absolutely would do that if you were to make that request.
Okay, quick follow-up, Mayor.
Please.
If the council approves this, can the board turn it down then?
Mayor and Councilmember Neese, I'm sure that that's always a possibility. I would not expect that to be the case in any of the conversations we have. This has been a topic of conversation at every single partnership board meeting for the last, I would say probably since September of 2019. This has been a pretty wide topic of conversation, and I have yet to have heard any negative or non-support from our board for this.
Okay. Mayor, I would like to make a substitute motion.
And let me just clarify that answer in case it affects your substitute motion, Councilmember Neese. If the board asks, and this would be a question for our city attorney, if they acted contrary to this, I assume it would be a recommendation. It wouldn't be binding on the council. The council can do what it wants on this. Wyeth Friday's nodding his head, Chris Kukulski nodded his head, and Brent Brooks nodded his head on that. So if that, I don't know if that makes any difference, but Councilmember Neese, I recognize you.
Thank you. I'd like to make a substitute motion of approval with the terms of the loan not extending beyond July 30th of 2039. I believe that's the current, Andy, is that the current expiration date of the TIF?
July 1, 20. Let me get that. I believe it's July 1, 2038. I want to give you the right. It is July 1, 2038.
2038. So without the extension of the TIF past July 1 of 2038.
Okay, Councilmember Boyette seconded that. Okay, we have then in front of us the substitute motion for approval, but without the TIF district extension. Councilmember.
May I speak to my motion?
You may. Councilmember Neese.
Thank you. I think these projects are good. With the 2-way street conversions, I look forward to more of those 2-way streets conversions. I think there was a lot of public participation and comment in that study. It did come to the Heights Task Force, as Wyeth mentioned. I was there in that meeting when they presented it. I think that I'm a little unsure about the parking. I would like to have seen a presentation, a little bit more detail on that, Chris, but I would support it. I think we need to automate some of our parking stuff, but I'm not in favor of extending the TIF district. These TIF districts do a good thing, but I think that after this one expires, if we need to, reset and start again, we can sure do that. We need to start getting some of these dollars that the TIF's been doing back into the community, and that will do that if we can let this expire and then reset it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Discussion on the substitute motion. Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I won't be supporting the substitute motion. Excuse me. I won't be supporting the substitute motion. It leaves $15 million on the table. Walk around downtown and look around and say, the redevelopment here is all done. We can walk away from $15 million by extending the TIF. We have that money to continue redevelopment. As I walk around downtown, I think that redevelopment is a process that is not yet complete. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the substitute motion, Councilmember Ronning.
Thank you. Andy, I just want to clarify, is it $15 million for the total 5-year period that the TIF would not be extended with this motion? Or is it, was it 15 million for the entire 5 years?
Yeah, it's just we're currently getting about $3 million a year in increment revenue, and it would be times 5.
Okay, and then also to clarify, the extension of the 5 years allows the city and the TIF an extra 5 years to get those bonds paid, correct? So it's not a bigger payment within that shorter period of time.
Yeah, so we would be paying the amount over 20 years rather than 25 years. That's correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Andy, just on the numbers, your numbers were based on current $3 million. The 2038 doesn't begin for 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
So assuming a 3% property rate increase with compounding, it wouldn't be $15 million. It would be something well north of, well over 50% more than that. So something in the 20s, probably something in the 20s.
That is correct. I'm confident it'll be greater than 15 million, but I'm not prepared to venture a guess at what that will be.
Sure, of course. Councilmember Brown, I think you had your hand up. Is that right?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. A couple of things. First, Andy, that $15 million is not just lost, correct? I mean, that's just what the TIF would pick up in increment.
That is correct. The 15 million would go to the taxing jurisdictions if it doesn't go to the increment.
Okay, I just wanted to clear that up, that it didn't just vaporize and disappear. I'm kind of torn on this one. I'm leaning towards supporting Nice's proposal here, but I'm a little concerned that this kind of seems to be an uncoordinated kind of effort coming forward. I'm surprised that the TIF board hasn't already looked at this and approved everything, and it comes to us and they're like, heck yes, let's go. You know, and I agree with Roy or Councilman Nice. I agree that there's been a lot of public comment. I wasn't a big supporter of the two-way, to be honest with you. But the way that they're being approached, I fully support it. I am a little concerned, though, that downtown has a ways to go. You know, we need some more work down there. We need, you know, some incentives. I'm just kind of torn. The more I talk, the more I sit and teeter on the fence. But I think I think I'll support the extended 5 years is what I think I'll end up doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. I also will not support the substitute motion. I'm very much for extending the TIF for 5 years. And I would just like to put in everybody's heads, because I feel like we haven't really brought this up. Revitalizing the downtown is probably the single best thing we can do to attract a new workforce to Billings. I mean, really, it's so big. And when I take people who visit me downtown right now, they say, why are 1/3 of your stores vacant? Where can I live? And the answer is, it's been that way my whole life, and there's not really anywhere affordable. So I'm sorry. That it is making Billings a very, very tough sell. So for me, like, eking out any more investment we can get into what is the heart of our city is just a no-brainer. So I won't be supporting the substitute motion. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Purington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as far as revitalizing the downtown, and a downtown merchant who's been there since the 50s has said the downtown will not revitalize until they can get it cleaned up. The other, with, transients and all of this, and I mean, we read Mr. Holden's part with cleaning up his parking garage. We've listened to a constituent in Ward 5, and she's written several times because she's in a building there and parking garage, issue after issue. We've listened to the YAM director, and his issues are the same things. So I think whenever and you've got people moving out of the downtown for that reason. So whenever you say to revitalize the downtown, plus you have out-of-state property owners that I guess they find there's a bigger tax break or shelter in keeping their properties vacant. So, how do you resolve that? I don't know. I really don't. We've had developers say it's much better, going west. The property's cheaper, the rent is cheaper. So whenever you say to extend the TIF, I am not supporting that extension. I have real concerns how the money can be used to revitalize. They keep looking for an anchor down there, and we've been through, One Big Sky, and now they're looking at other TIF districts. There's got to be something, that we're throwing things at the wall hoping something sticks, and I'm not sure what's going to stick. I'm not a developer, I'm not a promoter, but I think just as different ones have said, all of a sudden you come up with this, and the TIF board hasn't even approved it. And this is a major TIF project. So I just have a real problem with something moving so fast. If we knew about it, Chris, 6 months or 10 months ago, then we should have heard about it before now, because now we're less than a month away for approving this. So I will support Roy's motion on this, his substitute motion, because I just can't see putting that kind of money into a two-way. And back to Katie's point about surveying the downtown owners. Some of them have said, yes, I'll support it, but is it going to cost me money? You've had others that say, well, I really haven't checked my emails because I don't really think I want to do this. Because I've talked to some of the downtown people, and I'm not seeing this as a major retail two-way street conversion at this point. One of the downtown owners said, we've been here since the 50s and they've converted it at least 2 times, if not 3 times, and he can't see that there's a difference. So I will go along with Roy's substitute motion.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Shariki.
Councilmember Purington really kind of made probably what is the most important point about this whole issue as to whether or not we continue to need TIF districts or not. The bottom line is that previous councils have continued to spend millions of dollars on infrastructure, expanding the size of the city. So absolutely, right now, you can get a wonderful, nice piece of property out on Shiloh Road that is brand new, that is inexpensive, and guess what? We have been subsidized. We've been directly subsidizing that development. And the only tool we have to pull some of that investment money back into the older parts of town, and I'm not just talking about downtown, I'm not talking just about the Founders District tip that they want to do, but it's happening in Midtown right now, and it's been happening in the Heights and the core center of the Heights for a very long time. If we grow the physical size of the city faster than we grow the population and the economy, then you know what? We have tons of extra space to do things in, and the city does not thrive. No part of the city thrives. So yeah, we need the TIF district because we are spending millions of dollars on the edges. And right now, sitting on our capital improvement plan is another $14 million investment that we're going to make in land in the county. So that land can be developed. When are we going to get that $14 million back? So if you want return on investment, then we need to be investing in the places where we already have been investing. And that is what TIF districts do. And TIF districts right now are the only tool that we have in order to do that. So yeah, I will extend the life of this district by 5 years.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Browning, or Councilmember Ronning.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't vote the last time this was up specifically because of the language to not extend the TIF. I'm like Danny. I believe so strongly in the success of our tax increment financing districts. If you take a look at Billings pre-TIF districts, you can see a dramatic difference. And I couldn't agree more with Danny that the state of Montana, the legislature gives municipalities so few tools to create economic development. They tie the hands of municipalities in so many ways that we have some of these tools, and we'll be talking about another one later, that I can't get rid of those tools for future council members. I think these tools are critical, and I agree with Councilwoman Shaw that every municipality you look at that's thriving, it's their downtown that is in.
Councilmember Ronning, I apologize for interrupting you, and we'll let you complete your thoughts, but we've lost Councilmember Neese, and he's been sent into cyberspace and can't get back to join our party. So Tony, you should be getting a request to readmit him. Could you look at that and click on that?
I have not received any requests from him to join.
Does he have the right link?
Should be the same link he used to join at the beginning of the meeting.
I am just going to call him and make sure that he is clicking on that link. Hey, Roy, are you clicking on the old link that should, and then she'll readmit you.
I guess y'all don't need to hear my neighbor mowing his lawn. I'll mute.
Okay. Why don't you call Tony? Do you have her cell phone?
He can call on the public comment line.
You can call on if you call that public comment line number, then you can keep, 6196, and you can communicate directly with Tony and work that out. And then if you do not have internet connectivity, then let's get you a cell phone number a phone number so you can at least hear what's going on.
His cell phone, his smartphone should be able to Zoom.
Yeah, and you can try your smartphone if you have internet that way. Okay, thanks very much. Bye-bye. So just a little status report. We've been surprisingly fortunate with our technology thus far. Councilmember Neese is not sure that he has any internet capacity anymore. So he's going to work on that. He's going to communicate directly with Tony. We may want to delay any sort of vote here, obviously, until we have Councilmember Neese back. But so as not to delay things, we'll continue our discussion. Councilmember Ronning, I cut you off, so I want you to have opportunity to finish.
Yeah, thank you. You know, just to go back to the importance and values of thriving downtowns, and understanding that those thriving downtowns are what also help reduce crime, also help clean up different parts of the city. And I think that we're seeing that. I think we're seeing that happen. But, you know, it's going to take an effort and a belief from all of us, including all of the downtown business owners. But I don't agree with the idea that a TIF district doesn't give back to the community as a whole. I think that it does.
Can you email it to my work address?
Sure, hold on just a moment.
Hey, we can at least, Councilmember Neese, don't say anything nasty about other council members. We can hear you. So that's progress. I think that's progress.
Penny, you are going to get your point across here. Come hell or high water.
I'm get it out there. Yeah, I'm eventually going to get it out there. But,
I'm listening.
Yeah, but
continue.
But you know, our downtowns, just like what Kendra shared, and I think we're seeing that in the other TIF districts as well, in what they've been able to do in the eBird, what's happening in the S Borough. These TIF districts, they do give back to the community, and they give back to the community in different ways. And then, you know, just to share that 15 million, 20 million, whatever it might be, that does go back into the community. It's not like it's like what Sean said, it doesn't just disappear. It does go back into the community and help that revitalization. So at least that's how I see it, and see TIF districts as a really important tool, and think that they've been very successful in Billings and want to continue to see them gaining success.
Okay, thank you very much. Tony, do we have any sort of an update on where we are at with Councilmember Neese? He's not appearing on our screen.
Trying to log in from another computer.
Okay. So that Councilmember Neese can fully participate, apologize everybody for the delay. Why don't we just give him 60 seconds or so? If he's got another computer, that might be fairly brief.
Can somebody play the Jeopardy theme song?
Can you repeat the email that you sent it to?
Tony, did you hear that question? Tony, you're muted, but we heard Councilmember Ewalt or Councilmember Neese. Maybe you could just confirm for us that you're working with him when you're done talking to him. Councilmember Shaw, I have also heard people refer to us as the very large Brady Bunch. So in addition to the theme song from Jeopardy, we could have, can anybody hum, there was a lovely lady who met a man named Brady who, that's as far as I can remember.
We'll let you do that, Bill. Thank you.
Yeah, well, you just got all I've got. So without the music, so.
let's just not refer to council as Gilligan's Island.
Andy's got it memorized. His parents told him about it.
Yeah, or his grandparents, perhaps. It's a frightening thought.
The Brady what?
I don't know if he can hear us, but I think it's probably a good idea. You know, one possibility is for Councilmember Neese to just phone in, because then he can at least hear and talk to us. I mean, it's nice being able to see everybody's face, but I do not think it's a requirement.
He can hear you right now if you guys are ready to take a vote.
Okay, we'll proceed with further discussion and then a vote. I'll chime in on the merits here. I will, I guess, oppose the substitute motion for a couple reasons. Councilmember Purington's point about safety downtown is very, very important, but the current TIF district pays for a lot of that safety, and I'd hate to see that lost. We don't know what the situation, of course, will look like come 2038, but there's a decent chance that that will still be an issue. I hate to say it, but it's possible. Also, just selfishly, although it would be great to provide this additional money for the other jurisdictions, just selfishly speaking, if there were roughly $20 million available during that time period, we would be giving up about 22% of that in the way of city revenues, but getting about 78%. The city council would have the power to control how it is spent in the district. So bluntly put, it's a very good deal for the city in that way. And then last, just an observation that this topic did come up in January when we put it on our priorities. So we've been at least generally familiar with the issue for now for 3 or 4 months. So those are my thoughts. Any other discussion before we proceed to a vote on the substitute motion?
I would like to speak if you don't mind.
Hey, welcome back, Councilmember Neese. You may.
Thank you. I was just about to put my hand up and address some of the things you just addressed, Mayor, and I believe that you're right, the money doesn't go away, Sean pointed out, but what it will do if it's instead of 15 million or 20 million or 25 or whatever it is in 20 years from now, that'll actually go to that will be going back to the school districts, back to the county. It'll be helping us reduce the taxes. I did want to ask Andy how many years. I mean, the downtown has been in TIF. This is one TIF. There was a TIF prior to this, and there was a South 27th Street TIF. So there's been a lot of TIFs downtown, and we talked about revitalization. And as Pam said, we're not seeing a lot of improvement. We are seeing some. There's no doubt about it that we've seen some good things happen in some of the TIF districts, and that's why I'll continue to support TIFs that way. But I think that we continue to extend them. We need to actually keep them a little bit shorter so the dollars are spent a little more effectively, and so we get better results. And this is the reason why I don't think we should extend it. These projects that we're working on, I think they're good projects. I think they'll help the downtown. But we do need to get this increment back to the people sooner than later. And so that's why I would ask for support in voting that. So that's all I got. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll proceed to a vote. If there's no other comments. So again, this is the substitute motion, which is approval of the bond resolution to 2038, limiting the parameters for the term of the bonds to 2038, not to the 2044, the 5-year extension. If it passes, that concludes our discussion on this item. If it fails, then we'll go back to the underlying motion, which was approval to 2044. So all in favor of the substitute motion by Councilmember Neese, please raise your hand. In favor of the substitute motion. Voting in favor are Council members Boyette, Purington, and Council Member Neese. I'm assuming you're voting in favor of your motion.
I am.
And so those are the three. Are there any other in favor of the substitute motion? Okay, then those opposed to the substitute motion, please raise your hand. Voting in opposition are Cole, Yakowicz, Shaw, Ronning, Treaky, Joy, Brown, and Councilmember Ewald. Did we lose you?
That's what I was just gonna say is I can't see Frank there he is.
There's Councilmember Ewald. Or Councilmember Ewald, are you on the phone with Councilmember Neese, or we need your vote?
Can you hear me?
Now we can. Oh, but you're showing as mute there. Councilmember Neese, you're back on our screen. And Councilmember,
Can't hear anything you're saying. It's that, and then the whole screen goes out, and then it comes. So what's the deal?
Okay, thank you. All right, what we're going to do is we just voted, Councilmember Ewald. We can't see you now. We can see you. Great. And can you hear us now? Councilmember Ewald, can you hear us okay now?
Just intermittently.
And you're cutting out
Can
a
you
little
hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
So
what's the deal?
Because of that, we just had a vote on the substitute motion of Councilmember Neese. Did you vote in favor of the substitute motion of Councilmember Neese or against the substitute motion of Councilmember Neese?
I didn't vote because I was off screen, but I will vote for the substitute motion.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we
I
had.
would like to know everybody else. I would like to know how everybody else voted. That would be kind of nice.
Absolutely. So voting in favor of the substitute motion were council members Purington, Neese, Boyette, and Ewald. That'd be 4. Voting against the motion were council members Shaw, Brown, Joy, Treaky, Cole, Ronning, and Yakowicz, which would be 7. So the substitute motion fails, and we're back on the underlying motion in favor, which was made by Councilmember Yakowicz, seconded by Councilmember Shaw. So discussion now on the original motion in favor of the resolution. Further discussion on that motion. Is there any further discussion? The only thing I would suggest to staff is the motion really is not for approval of this process. It is for approval of staff to move forward with the sale of these bonds. And you'll see that in section 4.03. So I would just encourage staff to talk with bond counsel about what point we have to pull the trigger in case something were to happen. I don't anticipate any problems with that. I fully expect it will proceed. But in case in this public communication discussion, the wheels came off, we might have a little bit of time, but you'd have to talk to bond counsel. Councilmember Brown.
So in addition to approving the bond sale, we are extending the TIF to 44 as well, correct? That is part of this?
I don't know whether that requires a separate process. That's certainly assumed in the bond resolution that we just have in front of us. Yes, but I don't know if the extension of the TIF district is a separate legal action. I don't know whether Andy or Wyeth Friday or Brent Brooks can comment on that. Andy Zeller is kind of moving forward to his screen. Andy?
Mayor, Council, Councilmember Brown, there will be no other action. The statute says that the length of the district will go through the term of the longest outstanding bonds, sold within the first 15 years. So this action will authorize the final payment through the full term allowed by statute. Consequently, the life of the district will be extended in conjunction with this action.
Thank you, Andy.
Yep.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, further discussion on the underlying motion. Councilmember Yakowicz.
Thank you, Honor Council. I appreciate what Mr. Neese was trying to do, but I want to kind of just a philosophy of confidence in the downtown TIF. I do hope, and I do see a lot of improvement there. I do want to throw out that I echo what others have said. We want to empower the TIF board to make decisions. And I voted last time against funding for the study for a TIF because the board, downtown TIF board, did not vote on it. And I think we take authority away from the board, and it does not give me confidence. But I want to have confidence to support this. So that's an important thing. We have been working on this study for a long time. So as Mr. Kukulski said, we've been reaching out. We've got employers, business owners involved. I don't know if there was an actual sit down coffee with a bunch of people, but I do know that key leaders downtown have always told me too that two-way can be very beneficial. So I'm just wanting to extend again a confidence in the TIF. I really want to encourage them to put their gas on the pedal, empower the board to make decisions and come back to the council, so that we're reassured that the board is being used and respected and valued. And I'm hoping that this can really continue to revitalize downtown. So it's a little bit of a risk. Of course, it's a lot of money. And I appreciate, again, what others have been saying. But I'm hoping that in this time frame, we can really see a lot happening with the downtown TIF. Although I may not be supporting another TIF in that area, I do hope that this one can really go to another level. That's my hope. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Further discussion on the original motion? If not, we'll proceed to a vote. So all in favor of the original motion to extend the TIF district 2044, approve this resolution consistent with the original staff recommendation, please raise your hand. Those in favor of the motion. Voting in favor are council members Boyette, Cole, Yakowicz, Shaw, Ronning, Tariki, Joy, Brown. Those in opposition to the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in opposition are council members Purington and council member Ewalt. And I apologize, council member Nice, you're not live on the screen, so I didn't hear your vote. I couldn't see your hand, obviously. How did you vote, council member Nice? Council member Nice, you're muted on our.
I don't know.
You voted no. Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Nice in the opposition, so 3 to 8. Motion passes. Thank you very much. That concludes then item number 3. Move on to item number 4. Tony, would you read item number 4?
Item number 4, resolution ordering improvements for the 2020 missing sidewalk program. Staff recommends approval. Action, approval or disapproval of staff recommendation.
Okay, we do have a staff presentation here. Before we jump into that, Councilmember Ewalt, how are we coming across, Councilmember Ewalt?
Very terrible. I can only get like about 1 out of every 10 words, and then my screen goes blank for a few minutes, then it comes back. So this isn't a very good way to proceed. Maybe we should shut down and reload Zoom.
I'll look to somebody with higher technical ability than me. Also, do you have the phone number? You can at least call in and maybe watch, but also get better audio that way. Councilmember Nice?
Yes, I'm back online. I ended up rebooting the city computer that I'm using, and I'm back now. So I don't know what the problem was, but
you sound great.
You can try that, Frank, and see if that helps. Just reboot and reconnect, and Tony will let you in.
Councilor, we will wait, give you a minute or two to do that if you would like.
Everything's working right now. Everybody's moving, and that's the first time in about the last half hour that I've seen people moving. So,
okay. All right. Well, if anybody has these problems, please try to call that help number or try to get my attention. And hopefully we won't have any more of those glitches. With that, we'll move on then to our staff presentation. Chris Kukulski, I assume we should look to Dave Mumford unless you had something at the beginning of this.
We
Chris,
can't
you're
hear you,
unmuted.
Chris.
Sorry, thanks. We got a brief intro. We're going to turn it over to Dave. Dave's going to be brief. We know that you guys have got a lot of information on this. First of all, as a staff, we really find ourselves in a very unfortunate situation. We really feel like we're kind of in a lose-lose, which is where we never want to be. We feel there's a lot of misinformation out there and a lot that has happened that is unfortunate. So I just wanted to make that obvious point. Secondly, whatever the council chooses to do with this does not mean we have to change some completely new direction for future sidewalk program. So you always have the authority to make exceptions to policy or direction. And we have never intended to make this seem like it's all or nothing. It's never been about all or nothing. And I really have seen Debbie and Dave and their staff work very, very diligently with property owners to try to work out common sense solutions. Sometimes you guys need to make that call because it just didn't turn out the way that maybe we thought it would. So secondly, we want to make that clear. And last but not least, we'll never stop giving you our best professional advice. Ultimately, it's your call. There's a reason why there's a policy body that sets this direction. So it's unfortunate. I'm going to turn it over to Dave. He's going to give you a brief bit on the project, and then we'll gladly answer your questions and try to make as much lemonade out of this lemon as we can, frankly, for this investment in a great neighborhood in our community. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. Dave Mumford, Public Works Director.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I appreciate this opportunity to present for the reconsideration. Debbie Melling also has stayed on tonight so that she can answer any more technical questions than I will. I'm going to do a very short presentation, even though I know you probably are tired of seeing after several, but there are folks watching that are probably wondering what you're reconsidering and what your discussion is about. So, and I appreciate Chris's words. This is difficult for us in that we have a great deal of respect for all of you, and we appreciate your support in the past. This is not an issue between the two of us. So I hope that's always understood. Now, bear with me while I try to share my screen. Host disabled, participant sharing screen. Tony's not letting me share.
Come on, be a sharer.
There we go. Thank you, Tony.
Dave didn't let me know he needed me to let him share.
I thought somebody had paid her not to have this go so long. As I've stated before, past council and mayors and this council have given direction and policy that Public Works and Planning Department together have looked at in parks on how we deal with right-of-way and accessibility of both vehicles, pedestrians, and bicycles. One point I would like to make clarity is we throw out the word PROWAG. People have placed ADA standards into right-of-way, and ADA standards were never developed for right-of-way. They were developed for building structures. What's called PROAG, which is the public right-of-way access guidelines, are the federal guidelines that are recommended and are what the state of Montana has directed communities to use when we're dealing with right-of-way and make sure that accessibility works under the federal guidelines. Under PROWAG, they are recommending a desired minimum width of 6 feet, but an absolute minimum of 5 is what they would like, and a 2-foot buffer, relocation of all fixed objects, and as you can read, how we deal with adjacents. There are 3 parts to the concrete program. There's the small repairs, which are grinding and such to try to keep, which the city pays for, and we don't charge property owners, where there's an uplifting from a tree branch or settling. Small replacements, such as a driveway or something, And then there's the missing sidewalk program, which is too large for small replacements. And a lot of it has to do with ADA ramps, which we are trying to meet also to match in with the federal Justice Department ruling for the city of Billings. The priorities for missing sidewalks, as we stated before, are along arterials, collectors, school routes, and high pedestrian areas. All of our projects fit in these categories. Aronson has been stated that it's a residential street. Well, that does not make it not a collector street. Aronson is a collector, same as Polly or Colton. It is designated that by the transportation planning guidelines, and so it is in this group. This is kind of an overview map. You can see they're scattered, but there are 3 specific larger projects that are there. There's the 24th Street West, Lewis to Broadwater, Aronson between Governors and Nutter, and 11th Avenue North. Financially, ADA ramps, the city pays for ADA ramps, sidewalks greater than 5 feet. So if we're asking for a 7-foot sidewalk or a 6-foot sidewalk attached, we pay the difference. And improvements along non-addressed corners. The property owners are always given the option to do the work themselves or to have a contractor do part of it. And the assessments go on their taxes usually a year after the completion, once the final costs are determined. Alternatives, you can approve what was originally provided by staff, which is the program as it stood, with 33 miscellaneous properties, and then the 11th Street or 11th Avenue, Aronson, and 24th Street West. The council can disapprove the program, or the FY20 miscellaneous program altogether, or as the city administrator said, you do have the option of giving us directions to make modifications to the scope of what goes out this year, or even how we would look at design. I would ask that if the council does feel they want to modify the design in any ways, the design, each project does have to be designed. It may not think you have to when it's behind curb, but there are design standards that have to be met and that we are required legally and such to do. So I would ask that if you do want to change a design, that you would remove that from this year's program and allow us to come, because one would have to design the change, but also the resolution that you would be passing has the costs that would be assessed to each property. And so we would have to go back and redo those assessments so they would be correct, so that you would be making decisions on correct information. So if council wishes to make some design changes, we would be looking for what they are, and then ask that that section of the project be removed from this year and be placed in next year. Be happy to answer questions, and so would Debbie. And from there, we would like to help out with any discussions that the council would have for us.
Thank you very much, Dave. Questions for staff before we proceed to solicit a motion?
And I tried to talk as fast as I could, Mr. Mayor.
You did very well. We appreciate it. Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. So it said, I went through the PRO-WAG guidelines. It said the desired minimum is 6 feet. The absolute minimum is 5 feet. Has 6 feet been floated to the homeowners? Is that something they would at all consider?
We have talked about to them a change. We were looking at 7, because whether it's 6 or 7, we pay the difference of the 2 feet. That would give that 2 foot shy that PRO-WAG also discusses. But we have talked about the 7 feet where possible. There was one property owner tonight said he wanted a 5 foot. Well, he's getting 6 because there's 6 foot to the wall, and it would be difficult or look odd to maintain a 1 foot area difference. So that one property owner that had the wall that wanted 5 foot, he was only going to get 6 because of the wall.
Thank you very much. Other questions for Dave? Dave, the obvious one here, and it's not really a question, I guess really an observation, but you can disagree with it. There is no way to satisfy those ProAg standards with a 5-foot curb walk, correct?
Not if there's a mailbox or something. We would have to widen behind at that point or something to meet those standards. You could have 5-foot curb walk and then add a couple of feet behind the sidewalk, a mailbox or something, but those are the desired, but they don't read as shall, they read more as should. So they are what is the best desired standards for safety and accessibility. I hope that answers.
Yeah, I think you'd have to expand around the obstructions to create that minimum 5-foot clearance.
Correct.
And I thought it was 4 feet. I thought it was a clearance minimum of 4 feet. Are you saying it was a minimum clearance of 5 feet under ProAg?
Let me make absolutely sure of that before
Dave, can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
ProAg is 48 inches. NACTO is 5 foot. NACTO was the one that Dave was reading. ProAg is 48 inches.
Yes.
There's a lot of standards out there.
Thank you, Debbie.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. So 4 or 5 feet clearance under those 2 different standards. Other questions for Dave or Debbie? If Councilmember Neese?
You can see me and hear me, correct?
Yeah, you're looking good.
All right, thank you. Debbie, this question is actually for Debbie. You and I talked a little bit about this, and on the ProAg standards, you mentioned to me that they were not adopted by which organization?
So the ProAg standards are guidelines. They're not in law. And there's a whole history behind that. But the state of Montana has adopted them and several cities have adopted them. We've adopted them from a city standard mods point. So when we design things, we've adopted ProAg because it's the most applicable standard out there.
Okay, as a design standard, but not necessarily as the law.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's what I thought you had told me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Ewald.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe ADA accessible clear passage is 36 inches right now, isn't that the accepted?
That is ADA standards, and ADA are not right-of-way standards. They are structures and building standards. So that is the 36 inches is for ADA standards, not access on streets and right-of-way.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff, or is there a motion pertaining to item number 4? Councilmember Boyette.
Since I was the one that started this, I make a motion to approve the resolution ordering improvements for the 2020 missing sidewalk miscellaneous program with modifications, namely 5-foot curb and a 5-foot sidewalk on Aronson.
Okay, the motion is for approval with the change to mandate only a 5-foot curb walk on Aronson. Councilmember Ewald.
I'll second that.
Okay, so motion's made and seconded. Discussion on the motion. Councilmember Brown and then Councilmember Ronning.
I guess I'm in support for the most part, but I don't know that I want to limit it to 5 feet, and simply because we do need to meet the regulations. You know, if we have to bump it out around a mailbox or something to 6 foot, you know, I wouldn't be totally opposed to that. You know, I don't want to tie the hands that tight that we can't meet the regulations that we need to meet. You know, obviously the 6 foot to the wall is a good example of that. You know, it's not mandated, but it makes sense, right? So I'm in support, but I'd like to hear some other discussion, but I may amend that to go to as required, but curb and sidewalk for sure.
Okay, Chris Kukulski, our city administrator, wanted to comment. Chris?
So my comments are not in any way trying to guide what you approve. I just want clarity. So one of the things the staff said is if on Aronson, or if on any of these, but Aronson's been the only one that's come up, where you decide to give a directive different than the program that was put in front of you, we'd ask that you frankly postpone that part until next year or till we can bring it back to you, because we need to recalculate and get all the language proper. So if you're going to go with what was the original plan, then you're all set to do that tonight. If you want to move forward with everything except parts of the project, you could do that tonight. I would ask though, if you guys are going to create kind of the guideline tonight, that's okay, but I would say create that guideline for that space for us to come back to you possibly for next summer's projects or the next set of sidewalk projects, so we can get you the accurate, and the neighbors can have all the accurate information on how that assessment's going to affect them. Am I describing that right, Debbie and Dave, as far as we just want to be clear there?
Yeah, if, as I said in my email, some of the assessments will actually go up to go from boulevard to curb, and we never try to assess higher than the estimate because we never like to surprise anybody at the end with a higher number. So if there's one that, all things being equal, we have to move 4 more sprinklers, it'll be $1,000 more or $500 more or whatever that cost will be. We don't want to surprise anybody with an estimate too high. So that's, the estimates don't match the design if you change that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Council Member Ronning.
Thank you. So, and I guess this is really a two-part question. It's kind of with what Sean just said. It sounds like this motion is saying 5 foot everywhere. Well, what happens if there's a non-Aronson neighborhood that doesn't want a 5 foot curb sidewalk? Maybe they want the boulevard sidewalk. Maybe they want a different type. Does that motion now say it's 5 foot curb sidewalk for all of the neighborhoods that we're voting on for? And then, and maybe I'll let that question be answered first. I'm a little confused by that.
Councilman Ronning, who would you like to address your question?
I don't know if that's a question for Debbie or Dave or Chris. I don't know.
I guess I'm asking who made the motion. I think you're asking what the intent of the motion, if the motion was just for the Aronson topic, or, and I assume that's what it is. So Mike,
okay.
Yeah, would you just clarify?
Yeah.
Well, the motion was for the order improving of the 2020 missing sidewalk miscellaneous program. So the program will go ahead, but with modifications for Aronson only.
So Aronson only. I didn't hear that portion of it. It sounded like it just went to everything. Okay,
Aronson only.
Aronson only. Okay, so then my question with that then is, how does that work if, because like there was a picture that Frank and Mike sent with a really big mailbox, and then there was rocks. Does it have to be 5 feet? Does that section have to be 5 feet? I'm not sure I'm clear on this.
Would either Debbie or Dave address that? My understanding is that the ProWag standard requires 5 feet of clearance or 4 feet. So you'd have to bump around to make sure you protected either 4 feet or 5 feet. And we'd need to clarify that. So Debbie or Dave, can you comment on how this might work on the ground?
Sure, you would have to meet those guidelines. So you would have to do something around each mailbox, whether it be bulbing out a foot or whatever it takes. Some of those mailboxes are 2 feet. So you could say 5 foot clear, and that way you could go around everything.
Debbie, are we trying to, based on whatever has been adopted internally by the engineering department, trying to achieve a 48-inch ProWag clearance or a 60-inch, and I apologize, I don't know the other the name of the other industry group, but 48-inch or 60-inch clearance?
48-inch is the minimum that ProAg recommends. So as a designer, designing in the right of way, that's what we feel like that is a bottom line number. That is a bare minimum in order to be responsive to the entire public. The 60-inch and some of the other ones we've shown are design guidelines. And that's really about how you want your community to look and feel as far as walkability or just the look of it. So 48 is your bare minimum. Anything beyond that is design guidelines.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councilmember Purington and Councilmember Ewald.
Debbie, in regard to those 48 inches, because you go up and down the street, some of them have their mailbox in a whiskey barrel. Others have them in the ground with a single narrow pole. And so in many of those mailboxes, well, and I didn't count how many, are not permanent. So to take a swath around a mailbox just because it's in, a larger container than one set in the ground. And as you said, these are guidelines. Even if the council says 5 feet without the swerve, is that not, I don't understand when you say they're guidelines, we'll do whatever you want to put forth out there. So I'm just kind of concerned about the in and out phase of what you're saying might need to happen.
If I could also help with Debbie's, the 48 inches is the minimum, and that would be from the width of the top of the mailbox, not just if they have a post. And that is to allow people to have accessibility clearance around it. So it is difficult if you have a portable one, but generally people's mailboxes stay. That 48 inches is something that we do need to ensure that there are. The larger guideline, as Debbie said, is something that's very desirable to how a community functions and do you really want to encourage true accessibility. But we would need to try to provide for that. That's one reason why, I know it's a long answer, one reason why we looked at 7 foot that we paid the extra to, and it was attached to curb. That way we always knew that we would be able to provide that accessibility. It's there no matter what people put or move their mailboxes, and also helps with snow storage, but really is trying to get that clearance the whole way. So people move things or somebody decides to get a new mailbox, it still works.